The chamber is open and full of whispers.
What if a grieving, bitter young spy, a man who'd lost everything he loved, who lived only for atonement he hadn't yet earned, what if that man was given a second chance, not to save the woman he lost, but to save someone exactly like her? What if Severus Snape, at 25 years old, 4 years deep into grief so profound he'd told Dumbledore, "I wish I were dead," was handed a 6-year-old muggle-born girl whose accidental magic was tearing her life apart? This is the story of how guardianship transforms two people simultaneously, how a child prodigy learned to navigate the world not through rules and eager compliance, but through cynicism, strategy, and the dark arts of survival. How a man who existed only to atone learned to live for something more than penance. This is the story of what happens when Severus Snape raises Hermione Granger. Let's begin in 1985, when everything changed. Spring 1985. The incident: Hermione Jean Granger turned 6 years old on September 19, 1984. By March of 1985, her parents, David and Helen Granger, both dentists, both intelligent, both loving, were quietly, desperately terrified of their daughter. The incidents had started small: a dropped glass that hovered mid-air before Hermione caught it, a scraped knee that healed too quickly, the wound closing itself before their eyes, books floating off shelves when Hermione reached for them, moving through the air to land in her small hands. David and Helen were rational people, scientists in their own way, trained to diagnose problems through observation and evidence. They researched obsessively: medical conditions, psychological phenomena, anything that might explain their daughter's impossible abilities. They found nothing that fit, and Hermione, brilliant even at 6, knew something was wrong with her. She could feel her parents' fear. She saw how they flinched when objects moved without being touched, how they exchanged worried glances when she mentioned the strange things she could do. She began to hide it, began to suppress the feeling that came before the impossible happened, the tingling in her fingers, the pressure in her chest. She learned, at 6 years old, that being different meant being frightening, that the people who loved you could also be afraid of you. It couldn't last. Suppression of magic in young witches and wizards creates pressure that must eventually release. For Hermione, the release came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. A boy at school, Timothy Hartley, 8 years old and cruel in the way children can be, had been tormenting Hermione for weeks, calling her names, pulling her hair, mocking the way she read during breaks while other children played. That Tuesday, he pushed her down on the playground hard enough that she scraped both palms on the concrete. Hermione felt the pressure explode outward. Timothy flew backward as if hit by an invisible force, crashing into the playground equipment 15 feet away. His arm broke on impact. Other children screamed. Teachers came running. And in the chaos, in the fear and confusion, someone made a phone call. Not to emergency services, to a number that most people didn't know existed. A number for when things happened that couldn't be explained. The Ministry of Magic's Accidental Magic Reversal Squad arrived within the hour. The Ministry response. The Reversal Squad consisted of 3 wizards in Muggle clothing. Brown suits that were almost but not quite right, shoes that were slightly out of fashion, haircuts that suggested someone who didn't quite understand how Muggles presented themselves. They found Hermione sitting in the headmaster's office, alone, her small hands still scraped and bleeding. David and Helen had been called but hadn't arrived yet. Timothy was at hospital. The school was contained, teachers and students obliviated. The incident transformed in memory into a freak wind that had knocked the boy over. The senior member of the squad, a witch named Perkins who'd been doing this job for 30 years, crouched down to Hermione's level. "Hello, dear," Perkins said gently. "My name is Margaret. We're here to help." Hermione looked at her with brown eyes that were far too knowing for 6 years old. "I hurt him. I didn't mean to, but I did." "You didn't hurt him. Your magic did. There's a difference." "Magic?" The word came out quietly, hopefully. "That's what this is?" "Yes. You're a witch, Hermione. A very powerful one from what we've seen." The relief on the child's face nearly broke Margaret Perkins's heart. Here was a girl who'd thought she was broken, who'd been suppressing her very nature to avoid frightening her parents, discovering that she wasn't wrong. She was magic. But Perkins had seen cases like this before. The early manifestation. Unusual but not unprecedented. The suppression, dangerous. The explosive release, concerning. And most worrying of all, the fear she'd seen in the Granger parents' eyes when they'd arrived. They loved their daughter. That was clear. But they were also frightened of her. And a magical child growing up in an environment of fear, learning to suppress and hide her magic, was a child at risk of developing something terrible. An obscurus. Perkins made her report to the ministry that evening, and by morning, it had crossed the desk of someone with connections to Hogwarts. By afternoon, Albus Dumbledore knew about the case, and Dumbledore, who saw patterns where others saw coincidence, who moved chess pieces decades in advance, recognized an opportunity. Dumbledore's calculation Severus Snape sat in the headmaster's office 3 days after the incident, wondering why he'd been summoned. It was late March. Term was ongoing. He had 6th-year potions essays to grade and 7th years preparing for NEWDs who needed supervision. Severus, Dumbledore said, his voice gentle in the way that always preceded requests Snape couldn't refuse. I need to discuss something rather delicate with you. Another mission? Snape's voice was flat. 4 years into his service, waiting for a Dark Lord who showed no signs of returning, carrying out Dumbledore's orders because he had nothing else to live for. Not exactly. This concerns a child. A Muggle-born girl, 6 years old, who recently experienced a rather dramatic magical incident. Snape's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. The ministry has protocols for Muggle-born children. They'll receive their Hogwarts letter at 11. I fail to see why this concerns me. The situation is more complex than that. Dumbledore leaned forward, his blue eyes sharp behind his half-moon spectacles. The child, Hermione Granger, demonstrated exceptional magical power in her incident. But more concerning is what led to it. She's been suppressing her magic for months, possibly longer. Her parents love her but fear her abilities. They don't understand what she is. Then explain it to them. Modify their memories if necessary. Send someone to counsel them. Snape's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. I am not a social worker for frightened muggles. No, you're a man who understands what it means to live between two worlds. Who knows the damage that suppression and fear can cause? Dumbledore's voice softened. Severus, this child is at risk of developing an obscurus. Without intervention, without someone who can guide her, teach her, help her understand and control her magic, she may not survive to 11. The Ariana-Dumbledore parallel hung unspoken between them. Dumbledore had lost his sister to the exact scenario he was describing. A magical child, traumatized, suppressing her power until it destroyed her. What exactly are you asking me to do? Snape asked coldly. Meet her. Assess the situation. If my concerns are warranted, consider taking her on as your ward. Your ward. A Muggle-born child. Snape's voice dripped with disbelief. You want me? Former Death Eater Slytherin, a man who spent his youth despising Muggle-borns, to raise one? I want you to save one. Dumbledore's voice was quiet but implacable. You've asked me many times what more you can do for Lily's memory. Here is a brilliant Muggle-born girl who needs protection and guidance. Someone from our world who understands her before Hogwarts. Someone who can give her what Lily never had. The manipulation was transparent, but that didn't make it less effective. Snape felt the words hit exactly where Dumbledore intended. The guilt that had consumed him for 4 years, the desperate need to do something, anything, that might serve as atonement for his failures. This is a child's life, Albus, not a tool for your manipulation. No, Dumbledore agreed. She's a child who deserves a chance, and you're someone who can give her that chance. Will you at least meet her? Snape stared at the headmaster for a long moment. He should refuse. He should walk away from this transparent attempt to bind him further to Dumbledore's service, to saddle him with responsibility for a Muggle-born girl who would be a constant reminder of everything he'd lost. But he thought of Lily, of the brilliant Muggle-born girl who'd been his friend before Hogwarts, who'd understood magic instinctively, who'd never had anyone from the wizarding world to guide her until it was too late, who'd married James Potter partly because he was from a world she understood, while Snape had driven her away with his prejudice and cruelty. One meeting, Snape said. I will assess the child. Nothing more. Of course, Dumbledore said. And if there was satisfaction in his voice, Snape chose not to acknowledge it. Meeting Hermione. The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at the Granger home in Crawley, a commuter town south of London. Snape apparated to a quiet side street and walked the remaining distance, his black robes exchanged for a dark Muggle suit that was only slightly better than the Reversal Squad's attempts at blending in. The Granger house was neat, middle class, utterly ordinary. Snape knocked on the door at precisely 2 o'clock. David Granger answered. A man in his early 30s, with kind eyes and the careful posture of someone trying to appear confident despite significant anxiety. "Professor Snape, please, come in. We've been expecting you." The interior matched the exterior, tastefully furnished, clean, organized. A home maintained by people who valued order. Snape was led to a sitting room where Helen Granger waited, perched on the edge of a sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Thank you for coming," Helen said. "Professor Dumbledore explained that you might be able to help Hermione understand what she is." "Where is the child?" Snape asked. "In her room, reading." "She's always reading." Helen's voice carried equal parts pride and worry. "Should I call her down, please?" Helen left. David remained standing, clearly uncomfortable with this stranger in his home. "Professor Dumbledore said you teach at the school Hermione will attend, Hogwarts." "I teach potions," Snape confirmed. "Among other subjects." "And you're like her? You can do what she does?" "I am a wizard, yes." "As is your daughter a witch?" Snape's voice was deliberately neutral. "Magic is not a disease or aberration, Mr. Granger. It is an inherent trait, like eye color or left-handedness. But the things she can do are uncontrolled, because she is untrained. A 6-year-old witch has the same relationship to magic that a 6-year-old has to their own strength. They must learn control, boundaries, and proper application." Footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. Snape turned as Hermione entered the room. She was small for 6', with wild brown curls that clearly resisted any attempt at taming. Her eyes were large and brown, and fixed on Snape with an intensity that was distinctly unusual for a child her age. She wasn't shy or frightened. She was assessing him. "Hello," Hermione said. "Mum said you're a wizard." "A real one?" "I am." "Can you prove it?" The directness surprised him. Most Muggle-born children, when first confronted with magic, showed wonder or fear. This one wanted evidence. Snape drew his wand slowly, making sure not to startle her parents. He pointed it at a book on the side table, a thick medical text, and said softly, "Wingardium Leviosa." The book rose into the air, floating gently across the room to land in front of Hermione. She reached out to touch it, confirming it was real, then looked up at Snape with something like hunger in her eyes. "You can control it," she whispered. "The feeling. The things that happen. You can make them happen when you want to. Yes, with training and practice you will be able to do the same. Will you teach me?" The question was so direct, so desperately hopeful that Snape felt something shift in his chest. This child had been living with power she didn't understand, frightening her parents, frightening herself. And here he stood, someone who could give her answers. "That depends," Snape said carefully. "On several factors. But first, I need to understand what you can already do." They talked for over an hour. Snape questioned Hermione about her experiences. When the magic happened, what it felt like, whether she could predict it. He observed her carefully, noting the intelligence in her responses, the logical way she'd tried to analyze and categorize her own abilities, despite having no framework for understanding them. David and Helen watched nervously, but they didn't interrupt. They could see something they'd never managed to achieve. Their daughter relaxing, opening up, describing her experiences without fear of judgment. Finally, Snape asked to speak with the Grangers privately. Hermione was sent back upstairs, though she clearly wanted to stay. "Your daughter is exceptionally gifted," Snape said once she was gone. "More so than most magical children her age. The power she demonstrated in the incident at school was significant. Is that good or bad?" David asked. "It depends entirely on how it's managed. Mr. and Mrs. Granger, I need you to understand something critical. When magical children suppress their abilities, when they're taught to hide what they are, when they grow up in fear, the magic doesn't disappear. It turns inward. It becomes parasitic." Helen's face went pale. "Parasitic?" "The condition is called an obscurus. The repressed magic forms a dark entity that eventually destroys its host. It's rare, but it occurs exclusively in magical children who experience trauma associated with their abilities." "Are you saying Hermione has this, obscurus?" David's voice shook. "Not yet, but she's at risk. The suppression she's been practicing, the fear I see in both of you, these are the conditions that create an obscurus." Snape paused, letting that sink in. "Your daughter needs magical education now. Not at 11 when she receives her Hogwarts letter. Now before the damage becomes irreversible. Then teach her," Helen said immediately. Come here, tutor her, whatever she needs. It's not that simple. Hermione needs to be immersed in the magical world. She needs to understand that magic isn't something shameful to hide. She needs someone who can monitor her constantly, who can recognize the signs if something goes wrong. What are you suggesting? David asked slowly. Snape took a breath. He'd come here to assess the child, nothing more. He'd planned to recommend a tutor, perhaps arrange for the Grangers to have better ministry support. But standing in this ordinary living room, having spoken to a 6-year-old girl who reminded him painfully of another brilliant Muggle-born, he heard himself say, I'm suggesting that Hermione become my ward, that she live with me, under my guardianship, where I can provide the education and oversight she requires. The silence was deafening. You want us to give you our daughter? Helen's voice was barely above a whisper. I want to save her life, Snape said bluntly. You love her, that's clear, but you don't understand her. You fear what she can do. And Hermione knows it. She's 6 years old and already learning to hate herself for being different. If that continues, it will kill her. There must be another way. There isn't. Snape's voice was firm. I'm not asking you to abandon her, but I am telling you that she needs something you cannot provide. She needs the magical world, and I can give her that. David and Helen looked at each other, having a silent conversation that spoke of years of partnership. Finally, Helen spoke. We need time to think about this. To discuss it, of course, but don't take too long. Every day Hermione suppresses her magic is another day of risk. Snape left them his contact information, a rarity for him, and disapparated from the side street, his mind churning. What had he just done? He'd come to assess, and instead he'd offered guardianship, offered to take responsibility for a 6-year-old Muggle-born girl whose parents were dental professionals, whose life was completely ordinary except for the magic that might destroy her. He apparated to Spinner's End and sat in his tiny, cramped sitting room, staring at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, at the concealed door that led to his laboratory, at the evidence of a life built entirely around solitude. Could he actually do this? Raise a child? Transform this bachelor existence into something resembling a home? The answer, he realized with grim certainty, didn't matter. He'd made the offer, and if the Grangers accepted, if they trusted their daughter to a man they just met, a wizard from a world they didn't understand, then he would follow through. For Lily's memory, for atonement, for the principle that a child shouldn't die because the world didn't understand her. The decision 3 days later, the Grangers' response arrived via Muggle post. Snape had given them his address, though he'd never received Muggle mail there before. The letter was handwritten, careful, and devastating in its simplicity. Professor Snape, we've discussed your proposal extensively. We've also taken Hermione to see a child psychologist, we didn't mention magic, to better understand what she's experiencing. The conclusion we've reached is impossible and necessary in equal measure. Our daughter needs something we can't give her. She needs to understand her magic, to control it, to feel safe being who she is. We cannot provide that. If you're willing to take guardianship of Hermione, to teach her and protect her and help her become who she's meant to be, then we accept, with conditions. 1. Hermione will spend term times with you, September through June, learning magic and attending her wizarding school when she's old enough. 2. She will spend summers and holidays with us, maintaining connection to her Muggle heritage and family. 3. We will have regular contact, letters, visits when possible, whatever ensures we remain part of her life. 4. If at any point Hermione is unhappy or unsafe, the arrangement ends immediately. We're trusting you with the most precious thing in our lives, Professor Snape. Please don't make us regret it. David and Helen Granger. Snape read the letter 3 times. They'd agreed. These Muggle parents who loved their daughter were willing to let her go, to trust a stranger, because they recognized she needed more than they could provide. The weight of that trust was staggering. He sent his response that evening via owl. The Grangers would need to adjust to magical communication methods. The message was brief. Mr. and Mrs. Granger, your terms are acceptable. I will prepare appropriate accommodations. Hermione may begin her residence on June 1st, after the conclusion of the Hogwarts term. She will be safe. You have my word. Severus Snape, it was done. In less than 2 weeks, he'd gone from existing in isolated grief to becoming the guardian of a 6-year-old witch. Dumbledore was going to be insufferable about this. Preparing Spinner's End, Snape had 2 months to transform his house from a bachelor's den into something resembling a suitable home for a child. The challenge was more complex than simply adding a bedroom. Spinner's End was small, a terraced house in Cokeworth's poorest district, inherited from his mother. The sitting room was cramped, floor to ceiling with books. The kitchen was functional but grim. His own bedroom was sparse, and the basement contained his potions laboratory, filled with volatile ingredients and dangerous equipment. A child could not simply be inserted into this space. Changes were required. Snape started with the second floor. The house had 3 bedrooms, his own, a small room that served as storage, and his mother's old room, untouched since her death. He'd never had reason to convert them for other purposes. His mother's room would become Hermione's. It required more than just cleaning. It required transformation. Snape spent a weekend removing his mother's old furniture, repairing the walls with magic, and attempting to create something that might be suitable for a 6-year-old girl. He failed spectacularly at first. His initial attempt resulted in a room that looked like a smaller version of a Hogwarts dormitory, functional but cold. He stared at it, frustrated, and realized he had no framework for what a child's bedroom should contain. In desperation, he flew to Hogwarts and found Minerva McGonagall in her office. "Severus," she greeted him with surprise. "It's Saturday. What brings you here?" "I need advice," he said stiffly, "of a domestic nature." Her eyebrows rose. "I'm intrigued." "Please, sit," he explained the situation briefly. Dumbledore had already informed the staff of his impending guardianship, though few believed it would actually happen. McGonagall listened with increasing astonishment. "You're actually going through with it? Taking guardianship of a Muggle-born child?" "Yes, which is why I need advice. I'm attempting to prepare a bedroom, and I have no idea what a 6-year-old girl requires." McGonagall's expression softened. "Severus, children need more than just a bed and a desk. They need a space that feels safe. Personal. Theirs. I'm aware. I simply don't know how to create such a space." She spent the next hour providing practical advice. Books appropriate for young children, not just magical theory. Comfortable seating, adequate lighting. Colors that weren't simply black and dark green. She even offered to help, though Snape declined. This was his responsibility. He returned to Spinner's End and tried again. This time he painted the walls a soft cream color that made the room feel larger. He added bookshelves at child height and filled them with basic magical texts and Muggle children's books he purchased from a shop in London, feeling ridiculous the entire time. He created a small desk near the window where she could write and study. He added a comfortable chair in the corner. The result was simple but functional, a space that might actually be suitable for a child. Next came the security wards. Spinner's End was in Cokeworth, surrounded by Muggles, and Snape was a former Death Eater who'd made enemies. If Hermione was going to live here, the house needed to be fortress secure without feeling like a prison. He spent days layering protection, anti-apparition wards, detection charms for dark magic, alert systems for intruders. He warded the laboratory separately, ensuring a curious child couldn't accidentally access dangerous materials. He created emergency protocols, ways Hermione could contact him if he was at Hogwarts and she was here during holidays. The library posed a different challenge. His collection included dark arts texts, books on poisons, volumes that were decidedly not child-appropriate. He couldn't remove them. They were essential for his work, but he could restrict access. He placed charms on certain shelves, making them invisible and intangible to anyone but himself, until he decided Hermione was old enough. Finally, he addressed the financial reality. Hogwarts provided room and board for 9 months yearly, so his teaching salary had accumulated. He'd never had reason to spend it beyond basic necessities and potions supplies. But raising a child required resources: food, clothing, books, equipment. He visited Gringotts and established a separate vault for Hermione's needs, transferring funds from his own accounts. She would never know poverty while in his care. She would have everything required for her education and development. By the end of May, Spinner's End was as ready as it would ever be. The house was still small, still in a poor neighborhood, still dominated by books and potions equipment. But it was secure. It was functional, and in one upstairs room, there was a space prepared for a 6-year-old witch who needed somewhere to belong. Snape stood in that bedroom on May 31st, the evening before Hermione's arrival, and felt the weight of what he'd agreed to settle fully on his shoulders. Tomorrow, this stopped being theoretical. Tomorrow, he became responsible for a child, for her safety, her education, her life, for keeping her alive long enough to reach Hogwarts, and then beyond. for not failing her the way he'd failed Lily. June 1st, 1985. Hermione arrives. David and Helen Granger pulled up to Spinner's End at precisely 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. They'd driven from Crawley, their car packed with Hermione's belongings, clothes, books, toys she'd had since infancy. Snape watched from the window as they parked. He saw Hermione emerge from the back seat, looking small and uncertain, clutching a stuffed otter under one arm. She stared at the terraced houses, the industrial grimness of Cokeworth, the obvious poverty of the neighborhood. She was afraid. He could see it in her posture. He opened the door before they could knock. Mr. and Mrs. Granger, Hermione. He stepped aside. Please, come in. The house must have looked tiny compared to their middle-class home in Crawley. The sitting room was cramped, dominated by books, dark and cluttered. Helen's expression flickered with doubt. Was this really where they were leaving their daughter? Hermione, Snape said, crouching to her level, something that felt deeply unnatural, but necessary. Would you like to see your room? She nodded silently. He led her upstairs, her parents following. When he opened the door to what was now her bedroom, Hermione stepped inside slowly, looking around with those assessing brown eyes. This is mine? She asked quietly. Yes. You may arrange it however you like. The books are yours. The desk is yours. This is your space. She set down her stuffed otter carefully on the bed, then turned to face him. Will you teach me magic? Like you promised? Yes. Every day. When do we start? Despite himself, Snape felt something like approval. This child wasn't focusing on the strangeness of the situation or the fear of being left with a stranger. She was focusing on what she wanted: knowledge, control, understanding. We'll begin Monday, he said. You'll need the weekend to settle in. The Grangers stayed for 2 hours helping Hermione unpack, making sure she understood how to contact them. They'd arranged for a Muggle telephone to be installed, the first in Spinner's End's history, extracting promises from Snape about her safety and education. When they finally left, Helen Granger's eyes were red from crying. David had to physically guide her to the car. They both looked back at the house repeatedly, as if memorizing it, as if trying to convince themselves they were doing the right thing. Hermione stood in the doorway with Snape, watching them drive away. She didn't cry. She didn't run after them. She just watched until the car disappeared around the corner. Then she looked up at Snape. I'm going to miss them. I know. You'll see them again in August, and you may write to them whenever you wish. Will you really teach me magic? Every day? Yes. Good. She turned and walked back into the house with a determination that seemed far too adult for a 6-year-old. Then I don't want to waste time. Can we start today instead of Monday? Snape looked at this small, fierce child who'd just been left with a stranger in a strange house and was already demanding to begin her education. A child who'd been suppressing magic for months, who'd been afraid of herself, who'd just found out she wasn't broken. She was a witch. Very well, he said. We'll start today. But first, there are rules we need to establish. They sat in the cramped sitting room, Hermione on the sofa, Snape in his chair, and he began laying out the structure of her new life. The rules and foundations. Rule 1, Snape said. You do not enter my laboratory without explicit permission. The equipment and ingredients there are dangerous. Many could kill you if mishandled. Hermione nodded seriously. Where is your laboratory? In the basement. The door is warded. If you try to open it without permission, it won't work. He paused. Rule 2. You do not perform magic without supervision until I deem you sufficiently controlled. Accidental magic is one thing. Deliberate casting without oversight is forbidden. How will I learn if I can't practice? You'll practice under my supervision. Magic is not a toy, Hermione. It's a force that requires discipline and precision. You will not learn by experimenting randomly. You will learn through theory, observation, and controlled application. That sounds boring. It sounds like staying alive, Snape said bluntly. Magic kills people who treat it carelessly. You won't be one of them. She absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. What else? Rule 3. You attend lessons daily. I will design a curriculum appropriate for your age and ability. You will study when I tell you to study, practice when I tell you to practice, and rest when I tell you to rest. I don't need that much rest. I can read for hours. You're 6 years old. Your brain is still developing. Pushing yourself to exhaustion will impair your learning, not accelerate it. He fixed her with a stern look. I am not here to indulge childish impatience. I'm here to ensure you survive to adulthood with your magic intact and controlled. Fine. She sounded grudging but accepting. Rule 4. You will maintain your relationship with your parents. You'll write to them weekly. You'll tell me if you're unhappy or want to return to them. This arrangement exists to help you, not to imprison you. I won't want to leave, Hermione said with certainty. I want to learn magic more than anything. You say that now, 6 months from now when I've assigned you homework on the properties of Moonstone versus Sunstone, and you're bored and tired, you may feel differently. I won't. The conviction in her voice was absolute. Snape studied her for a long moment, this small girl who'd already decided she wanted magic more than comfort, learning more than ease. We'll see, he said. Now, let's begin with the most fundamental question. Do you know what magic is? It's the things I can do. Making things move. Making things happen. That's magic's effect, not its essence. Snape leaned forward. Magic is a force that exists in certain individuals, wizards and witches. It's connected to your life force, your emotions, your will. When you were pushing that boy at school, you didn't consciously cast a spell. You felt anger, fear, and desperation, and your magic responded to those emotions. So magic does what I feel. Uncontrolled magic does what you intend. That's the difference between accidental magic, which every young witch experiences, and deliberate spellcasting, which requires training. He spent the next hour explaining magical theory at a level a 6-year-old could comprehend. He described the difference between internal magic, the power inside her, and external magic, spells, potions, enchantments. He explained that wands were tools that focused and directed magic, not the source of it. Hermione absorbed everything with fierce concentration, asking questions that demonstrated she was actually thinking about the material rather than just memorizing it. If magic is inside me, she asked, why do I need a wand? You don't, for accidental magic. But deliberate spellcasting requires precision. A wand provides that precision. It's the difference between pushing someone with your hands versus using a lever to move a boulder. The force comes from you, but the tool amplifies and directs it. When do I get a wand? When you're 11 and enter Hogwarts. Until then, you'll learn theory, practice control of your accidental magic, and develop the discipline required to use a wand safely. 5 years of just theory? She looked devastated. 5 years of foundation, Snape corrected. By the time you receive your wand, you'll understand magic better than most wizards who've been casting for decades. You'll know why spells work, not just that they work. You'll have control most adult wizards lack. But I want to do magic now, and you will. Controlled accidental magic is still magic. We'll work on developing your ability to trigger and direct it deliberately. But Hermione, he waited until she met his eyes. Magic is not a gift you've been given. It's a responsibility you must earn the right to wield. Do you understand? She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, yes, I understand. Good. Then we'll begin properly tomorrow. Today, you should rest, adjust to your new home, and write to your parents so they know you've arrived safely. I'm not tired, Hermione. His voice held warning. What did I say about resting when told to rest? She deflated slightly. Fine, I'll write to my parents. The first week established patterns that would define the next 5 years. Hermione woke at 7 each morning. Breakfast was simple. Snape was not a cook, but he managed eggs and toast adequately. By 8 o'clock, they were in the sitting room for lessons. The first lessons focused on magical history and theory, subjects that required no wand, just intelligence and attention. Snape discovered quickly that Hermione's capacity for learning was extraordinary. She absorbed information at a rate that would have made most adult students jealous. Goblins, he said on Tuesday morning, governed themselves independently until the 1612 Goblin Rebellion, when, Hermione, what are you doing? She looked up from the notebook where she'd been writing rapidly. Taking notes. You're 6 years old. I'm not testing you on this material. How will I remember it if I don't write it down? You'll remember, because I'll repeat important information. You don't need to transcribe every word I say. But what if I forget something important and need to reference it later? Snape stared at this child who was worried about future reference needs for goblin history. Fine. Take notes if you wish, but keep up with the lesson. She did. Somehow she managed to write and listen simultaneously, asking intelligent questions that proved she was processing the material even while recording it. The afternoons were dedicated to control exercises. Snape would place objects around the room, books, quills, small stones, and have Hermione practice deliberately triggering her accidental magic to move them. Feel the sensation that comes before the magic happens, he instructed. The pressure, the tingling. Recognize it, then direct it toward the object you want to affect. It took 3 days before she managed to make a quill move deliberately rather than by pure emotion. When it finally shifted 6 inches across the table, Hermione's face lit up with triumph. Again, Snape said. She tried. Nothing happened. Again. 6 more attempts before the quill moved again. Why isn't it working every time? She asked, frustrated. Because you're 6 years old and have been doing this for 3 days. Consistency requires practice. Keep trying. By the end of the week, she could move small objects with reasonable reliability. Not perfectly. Her control wavered when she was tired or distracted, but the foundation was there. Friday evening, Snape found her in her room, surrounded by books he'd provided on basic magical creatures. "What are you doing?" he asked from the doorway. "Reading ahead. You said we'd cover magical creatures next week. I wanted to be prepared." "Hermione, I didn't assign this as homework." "I know, but if I read ahead, I can ask better questions during lessons." He should have told her to rest, to act like a normal 6-year-old, to play with her toys instead of studying. But looking at her eager face, at the careful notes she'd already made on pixies and gnomes, he couldn't bring himself to discourage her. "Fine, but you will also sleep adequately. Knowledge is important. So is rest." "I will. I promise." She paused. "Professor Snape? You may call me Professor, or Severus if you prefer. Professor Snape is unnecessarily formal for daily use." She considered this. "I'll call you Professor. It feels right." Another pause. "Professor? Yes. Thank you. For teaching me. For all of this." She gestured around her room, at the books, at the evidence that someone had prepared a space specifically for her. Snape felt something uncomfortable in his chest. "You're welcome. Now rest. Tomorrow we begin potions theory." "Really?" Her eyes went wide. "Already? You'll be learning theory only. No actual brewing until you're older. But potions is the foundation of much advanced magic. The sooner you understand the principles, the better." "I won't disappoint you," she said with absolute seriousness. "See that you don't," he said, and left before she could see his expression soften. He descended to his laboratory and stood among the bubbling cauldrons and ingredient shelves, processing the week. A week ago, he'd been alone. Now there was a child upstairs, reading about magical creatures, preparing questions for tomorrow's lessons. A child who reminded him painfully of Lily. Brilliant, eager, Muggle-born, determined to understand magic from first principles. A child who was now his responsibility. Who trusted him to teach her, protect her, guide her through a world that would judge her for her blood. He'd told Dumbledore this was atonement. Standing in his laboratory, hearing small footsteps overhead as Hermione moved around her room, Snape realized it was something more complicated than that. It was a second chance. Not to save Lily, nothing could do that, but to prove he could protect someone like her, to ensure that this brilliant Muggle-born child survived, thrived, and became everything she was capable of becoming. "Don't fail her," he told himself quietly. "Whatever else you do, don't fail this one." Upstairs, Hermione was still reading, her brilliant mind absorbing everything about the magical world she'd just discovered. She had no idea that the man teaching her had once been a Death Eater, that he'd loved and lost someone exactly like her, that he was broken in ways she couldn't yet understand. She only knew that someone was finally teaching her what she was, that magic wasn't something shameful, and that she had 5 years to learn everything before Hogwarts. 5 years with Severus Snape. 5 years that would transform them both. Year 1. Building foundations, age 6. 7. The summer of 1985 established rhythms that would define Hermione's education. Each morning began with theory, magical history, creature classification, the fundamental principles that governed spell work. Each afternoon brought practical exercises in controlling her accidental magic. Evenings were for reading, with Snape assigning texts from his extensive library and expecting detailed discussions the following day. By August, when Hermione returned to the Grangers for 2 weeks before the start of Snape's Hogwarts term, she'd transformed. David and Helen barely recognized their daughter. "She's so serious," Helen said to Snape during the handover, watching Hermione carefully organize her belongings with an efficiency that seemed wrong for a 6-year-old. She used to play, to laugh. Now she just studies. She's learning discipline, Snape said. It's necessary for magical control. She's 6 years old. Discipline is important, but so is childhood. Snape had no answer for that. He didn't know how to balance childhood wonder with the harsh realities of magical training. He only knew that Hermione needed control, needed knowledge, needed to understand magic before it destroyed her. "I'll spend more time with her," Helen said firmly. "While she's here, I'll make sure she does things normal children do." The 2 weeks with her parents were difficult for Hermione. She missed her lessons. She missed the structure Snape had imposed. She missed talking about magic with someone who understood it. Her parents took her to parks, to museums, to children's activities, and she participated dutifully but without enthusiasm. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" David asked after finding her reading one of the magical theory books she'd brought with her instead of watching the television program her parents had put on. "Nothing's wrong. I just prefer reading. You used to like telly. You used to like playing." "I still like playing, but Professor Snape says idle time is wasted time. That I should always be learning something." David and Helen exchanged worried glances. Their daughter was becoming someone they didn't quite recognize. Brilliant, focused, but missing something essential: the joy of being a child. When Snape collected her in early September, Helen pulled him aside. "She needs balance," Helen said. "Please, I know the magic is important, but she's still a little girl. Let her be a little girl sometimes." "I'll consider it," Snape said stiffly. He didn't, really. When term started at Hogwarts and Hermione remained at Spinner's End, Snape had arranged for a house elf from Hogwarts to check on her during the day while he taught. The lessons intensified rather than relaxed. Hermione was enrolled in Muggle primary school for socialization purposes, attending Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. But the moment she returned home, she'd find assignments Snape had left her: texts to read, essays to write, controlled magic exercises to practice. The house elf, a nervous creature named Nipsey, had instructions to ensure Hermione ate properly and didn't access the laboratory. Beyond that, the child was left to self-direct her learning. "Master Snape leaves too much work for little miss," Nipsey observed one afternoon, watching Hermione struggle through a text on basic herbology that was clearly written for much older students. "I can handle it," Hermione said stubbornly. "Professor Snape wouldn't assign it if he didn't think I could do it." This belief, that Snape's expectations were always exactly calibrated to her abilities, drove her forward through material that would have defeated most adult students. By age 7, Hermione could identify 50 common potion ingredients on sight, explain the basic principles of transfiguration theory, and recite the Goblin rebellions in chronological order. She could also move objects with her accidental magic reliably, control her emotional responses to prevent magical outbursts, and had begun to develop the mental discipline that would later make occlumency possible. What she couldn't do was make friends at primary school, relate to other children, or remember what it felt like to simply play without purpose. The potions education begins. Age 7. 8. Today, Snape announced on Hermione's 7th birthday, we begin practical potions work. Hermione had been waiting for this moment for over a year. "I thought you said I was too young for brewing." "You are too young for independent brewing. You're not too young to observe and assist under direct supervision." He led her down to the laboratory, the first time she'd been permitted entry. "The rules are absolute. You touch nothing without my explicit instruction. You ask questions after I've finished explaining, not during. And if I tell you to step back, you move immediately. Understood?" "Yes, Professor." The laboratory was everything Hermione had imagined and more. Shelves lined every wall, filled with jars and bottles of ingredients she'd only read about. Cauldrons of various sizes and materials hung from hooks. A large workbench dominated the center, scarred from years of use. The air smelled of complex chemical reactions and preserved materials. "Potions," Snape said, his voice taking on the lecturing tone she knew well, "is the subtle science and exact art of combining ingredients in precise measures under specific conditions to achieve desired magical effects. It's not wand-waving. It's not incantations. It's chemistry elevated to art." "Like regular chemistry?" Hermione asked. She'd been reading her parents' old textbooks, trying to understand the Muggle science that seemed related to what Snape taught. "Similar principles, different applications. Muggle chemistry deals with mundane matter. Potions deals with magical materials that behave according to laws Muggle science doesn't recognize." He gestured to the shelves. Bizarre, what is it? A stone from a goat's stomach? Used in antidotes to most poisons? Correct. Why does it work? Because. Hermione hesitated. She'd read about bezoars, but hadn't seen an explanation of mechanism. I don't know. Good. Knowing what you don't know is the first step to learning. A bezoar works because it absorbs toxins through a magical process related to the goat's digestive purification system. The stone essentially concentrates the animal's natural poison resistance into a portable form. He pulled a jar down. Today we'll brew a simple burn-healing paste. No dangerous ingredients, no complex technique. You'll observe, then assist with preparation. The next 2 hours were revelation. Snape brewed with a precision that bordered on artistic. Every cut of every ingredient was exact. Every stir counted. Every moment of timing mattered. And he explained everything, not just what he was doing, but why. Peppermint is clockwise. 3 stirs. Why? Because peppermint's magical properties respond to solar motion. Widdershins, counterclockwise, would invoke lunar properties we don't want in a daytime use paste. Hermione absorbed it all, asking questions only when Snape paused, taking mental notes since she couldn't write while watching. Next time, Snape said as the paste turned the correct silver-blue color, you'll prepare ingredients under my supervision. Eventually you'll brew while I observe. But that's years away. For now, observation and basic prep work. When can I brew alone? When I'm confident you won't poison yourself or burn down my laboratory. Age 13, perhaps. That's 6 years. Yes, patience is also a required skill for potions mastery. Over the following months, Hermione became Snape's laboratory assistant. She prepared ingredients, carefully, under supervision, learning the exact angle for slicing root vegetables and the proper crushing technique for crystalline materials. She observed dozens of brews, from simple healing salves to complex drafts that took days to complete. Snape used the laboratory time to teach lessons impossible in pure theory. He'd show her what happened when ingredients were added in the wrong order. Controlled explosions, foul smells, occasionally interesting failures. He'd demonstrate the difference between powdered and diced ingredients, between fresh and dried, between materials harvested at different moon phases. This, he told her during a particularly complex brewing session, is why potions is the most precise of magical disciplines. Charms can be adjusted mid-cast. Transfiguration can be corrected if imperfect. But potions? Once you add an ingredient, it's done. The only path is forward. You must think 12 steps ahead, anticipate problems before they occur, and execute flawlessly. What if you make a mistake? Then you start over. Or, if the mistake is severe enough, you evacuate the laboratory and hope the explosion is contained. Has that happened to you? Twice. Once as a student, once as a Death Eater brewing something I shouldn't have been. He glanced at her. Don't ask about the second time. You're not old enough for that story. But he'd said it. Hermione had been carefully not asking about Snape's past, about the dark arts books she'd seen in the restricted sections of his library, about the way he sometimes looked haunted when news of certain wizarding families appeared in the Daily Prophet. Were you really a Death Eater? She asked quietly. Snape's hands stilled over the cauldron. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, yes. Why? Because I was young, angry, and stupid. Because I believed in blood purity and thought I could gain power through Voldemort's service. Because I made terrible choices that I will spend my life atoning for. Do you still believe in blood purity? He looked at her directly. If I did, would I be teaching a Muggle-born child? People can be hypocrites. Yes, they can. He returned to stirring the potion. I don't believe in blood purity, Hermione. I learned far too late that blood means nothing. Talent, intelligence, character, these matter. Who your parents were, irrelevant. Then why do so many wizards care about it? Because it gives mediocre purebloods an excuse for their mediocrity. If they can blame Muggle-borns for stealing magic or diluting bloodlines, they don't have to face their own inadequacy. His voice held contempt. The most powerful wizard of the last century was a half-blood raised in a Muggle orphanage. The woman he stopped himself. Someone I once knew was Muggle-born and more talented than most purebloods I've met. Blood means nothing. Hermione absorbed this. Who was she? The Muggle-born woman? Someone I failed to protect. That's all you need to know. It wasn't, really, But Hermione had learned to recognize when Snape would answer questions and when he'd shut down completely. She filed the information away and returned to watching the potion. She was 7 years old and already understood that her guardian carried secrets, guilt, and a past he couldn't escape. She understood that he was teaching her partly from obligation, partly from some debt he owed to someone else. It didn't make her trust him less. If anything, it made her more determined to prove worthy of his teaching. To show him that this Muggle-born child wouldn't fail, wouldn't be another person he couldn't save. The dark arts question. Age 8. 9. The question of dark arts education arose during Hermione's 8th year under Snape's guardianship. She'd been reading in the sitting room, a text on defensive spells, when she encountered a reference to the killing curse that assumed knowledge she didn't have. She went to Snape's study where he was grading Hogwarts essays. "Professor, what's Avada Kedavra?" Snape's quill stopped mid-word. He looked up slowly. "Where did you encounter that term?" "This book on defensive magic. It mentions the 3 unforgivable curses, but assumes the reader already knows what they are." "I don't." He closed his eyes briefly, clearly debating something internal. Finally, "Sit down." Hermione sat. "The killing curse," Snape said carefully, "is one of 3 spells classified as unforgivable, meaning their use on another human being carries an automatic life sentence in Azkaban. It causes instant death with no countercurse. The incantation is Avada Kedavra, from the Aramaic phrase meaning, "let the thing be destroyed." How does it work? No one knows precisely. It severs the connection between body and soul through magical force. There's a flash of green light, and the victim dies with no mark, no pain, no warning. Can you block it? Physical objects can block it. Hide behind something solid, and the curse hits the barrier instead. But magical shields won't stop it. The only recorded case of someone surviving was... He stopped. Someone who was protected by ancient magic involving sacrifice. Hermione thought about this. "You're telling me this because you think I need to know." "I'm telling you this because you asked, and lying to you would be worse than trusting you with dangerous knowledge." He leaned forward. "Hermione, there are wizards who want to hurt people like you. Muggle-borns. I can either shelter you from that reality until you face it unprepared, or I can teach you to recognize threats and defend yourself. Which would you prefer?" "Teach me," she said immediately. "That's what I thought you'd say." He pulled a different book from his shelf, this one clearly old, the cover unmarked. "This text covers dark arts recognition and defense. It's not appropriate for an 8-year-old. I'm giving it to you anyway, with rules." "What rules?" "You read it only in this study, where I can answer questions and monitor your reactions. You don't discuss the content with anyone outside this house. And you remember that knowing about dark arts is not the same as practicing them. Understanding how the killing curse works doesn't mean you should ever cast it. Understood?" "Yes, Professor." Over the next year, Hermione learned things no 8-year-old should know. She learned about the Cruciatus Curse, torture through magical pain that could break minds. She learned about the Imperious Curse, control that stripped away free will. She learned about dozens of other dark spells, their effects, their histories, their tells. How do you recognize when someone's been imperused? Snape quizzed her one evening. Glassy eyes, delayed responses, behavior inconsistent with their normal personality. But skilled casters can make victims appear normal. So you look for smaller signs: lack of emotional affect, literal interpretation of commands, absence of initiative. Correct. And if you suspect someone's imperused, don't confront them directly. Alert authorities if possible. If authorities are compromised or unavailable, avoid being alone with the person and look for opportunities to break the caster's control. How do you break imperious? The victim must resist from within. Throw off the control through force of will. External help is limited. Stunning the caster may work if they're actively controlling the victim. Adequate. He moved to the next topic. Identify the curse from symptoms. Victim experiences burning sensation across skin. Develops boils that spread rapidly. Eventually, victims cannot breathe due to swelling. Hermione thought. It sounds like Melifor's jinx, but that just causes a pumpkin head. Wait. She accessed her mental catalog. Furnunculus curse progression? No, that's just boils. The breathing component suggests tentaculus hex? No, though that would cause breathing issues through a different mechanism. The answer is the pustula maledictus, a dark curse specifically designed to kill through induced allergic cascade. Rare, difficult to cast. But if you encounter it, the victim needs immediate countercurse, or they'll suffocate within 10 minutes. What's the countercurse? That's advanced healing magic beyond your current scope. What matters is recognition. If you see those symptoms, you know what's happening and can seek appropriate help. This was how Snape taught dark arts, clinically focused on recognition and defense, never glorifying or minimizing the evil of the spells. He treated dark magic like a disease. You needed to understand it to protect yourself, but understanding didn't make it acceptable. Why do people use dark arts? Hermione asked one evening. If they're so terrible, why learn them at all? Power, Snape said simply. Dark arts offer shortcuts to effects that would require significantly more skill through conventional magic. Killing someone with Avada Kedavra is easier than casting 17 cutting curses. Controlling someone with Imperius is easier than carefully constructed persuasion charms. Dark magic appeals to those who want results without earning the skill to achieve them properly. Did you use dark arts when you were a Death Eater? He'd been waiting for this question. Yes. Did you kill people? No. Not with my own hand, though I witnessed deaths and did nothing to prevent them, which is perhaps worse. His voice was flat, emotionless, the tone he used when discussing things that hurt. I wasn't a soldier, Hermione. I was a brewer and researcher. My value to Voldemort was my skill with potions, not my willingness to murder. That doesn't absolve me. Being complicit in evil is still evil. Do you regret it? Every day. But regret doesn't undo what was done. It only ensures I don't make the same mistakes again. Is that why you're teaching me? To make up for what you did? He looked at her for a long moment. Partly, but it's more complicated than simple atonement. I'm teaching you because you need to be taught, because you could be extraordinary, and because, he stopped, because I failed to protect someone like you once. I won't fail again. Hermione understood, at 8 years old, that she was somehow connected to Snape's past in ways he wouldn't fully explain. That there had been someone, a Muggle-born woman, someone he'd cared about, someone he'd lost. That Hermione was, in some sense, a second chance for him. It should have made her angry, being someone's redemption project. Instead, it made her more determined. If Snape was trying to atone for old failures by raising her, then she'd make sure she was worth the effort. She'd become powerful enough, skilled enough, that she could never be the person someone failed to protect. Occlumency, a controversial decision. Age 9. The decision to teach Hermione occlumency came during her 9th year, and it was controversial even in Snape's own mind. Canon establishes that occlumency is difficult, that Harry struggled with it at 15, that Snape's teaching methods were harsh to the point of abuse. But Hermione wasn't Harry. She was younger, more disciplined, and already trained in emotional control through years of managing accidental magic. The question was whether a 9-year-old could learn mental discipline without psychological damage. Occlumency, Snape explained one evening, is the magical defense of the mind against external penetration. It's not about blocking specific thoughts. It's about organizing your mind so that even under legilimency assault, you remain in control. What's legilimency? The magical skill of extracting emotions and memories from another person's mind. Some wizards possess natural talent for it. Others learn it through study. Either way, it's a tool often used by those who want information you don't wish to give. Like Voldemort? Yes, like Voldemort. Also like certain ministry officials, skilled interrogators, and anyone else who might want to access your thoughts without permission. Hermione considered this. You're telling me this now because you think I need to learn it. I'm telling you now because the foundation of occlumency isn't mystical. It's mental organization and emotional control, skills you've been developing for 3 years. What I'm proposing is formalizing that training. Will it hurt? The question was perceptive. Snape's memories of teaching Harry were still years away, but he knew that legilimency could be invasive, painful, traumatic. Using it on a 9-year-old would be unconscionable. I won't use legilimency on you, he said firmly. Not until you're much older and can give informed consent. What I'll teach you is the mental discipline component, organizing your thoughts, controlling emotional reactions, building mental shields. The defensive application comes later. How do you organize thoughts? Through visualization and practice, you create a mental space. Some people use a room, some use a filing system. Some use more abstract structures. The specific metaphor doesn't matter. What matters is creating order in your mind so that under stress, You can access what you need and protect what you don't want revealed. He spent the next months teaching her meditation techniques, dressed up as mental exercises. Picture your mind as a library, he'd instruct. Each memory is a book. Each emotion is a section. When you feel anger, you're not drowning in it. You're selecting the anger section and choosing which book to read. It was abstract for a 9-year-old, but Hermione approached it like any other subject, with fierce determination and methodical practice. She'd sit for 30 minutes each evening, eyes closed, mentally organizing her thoughts according to Snape's instructions. "This is boring," she complained after 2 weeks of no visible progress. "Good," Snape said. "If it were exciting, you'd be doing it wrong. Mental discipline is boring. It's also essential." "Why?" "Because the alternative is having your mind accessible to anyone with legilimency training. Do you want Voldemort, if he returns, to be able to pluck your thoughts from your head, to see everything you care about and use it against you? No. Then continue practicing." The progress was gradual. By age 10, Hermione could reliably control her emotional responses. She didn't have outbursts of accidental magic when upset, could maintain composure under stress, and had developed a mental organization system that served her well in studying. Whether this constituted occlumency in the formal sense was debatable. Snape hadn't tested her against actual legilimency. But he'd given her the foundation, the mental discipline that would make real occlumency possible later, if it became necessary. The personality that emerged, age 6, 1-1. By the time Hermione reached 11, she was recognizable as Hermione, but fundamentally different from her canon counterpart. Canon Hermione at 11 was eager to please, insecure about belonging, desperate to prove herself through rule-following and academic achievement. She raised her hand constantly, not just to show off, but to validate her right to be in the magical world. Snape-raised Hermione had no such insecurities. She'd been immersed in magic since age 6. She knew more about potions, dark arts, and magical theory than most Hogwarts 7th years. She had no doubt she belonged in the magical world. The question was whether the magical world was ready for her. Her manner was more reserved than Canon Hermione's. Where Canon Hermione bubbled with enthusiasm, Snape's Hermione observed carefully before speaking. She'd learned from Snape that speaking first meant showing your hand, that information was power, and that asking questions revealed what you didn't know to people who might use it against you. She was still brilliant, perhaps more so given her early training, but the brilliance manifested differently. Instead of raising her hand for every question, she'd wait to see if others knew the answer first. Instead of immediately correcting classmates' errors, she'd note the mistake and evaluate whether correction served any purpose. Instead of trusting authority figures by default, she'd assess their competence and treat them accordingly. "You've made her cynical," McGonagall observed to Snape during one of her visits to check on the arrangement. She'd been monitoring the guardianship at Dumbledore's request, ensuring the child wasn't being mistreated. "I've made her realistic," Snape corrected. "She understands that authority doesn't equal correctness, that rules sometimes protect those in power rather than those they govern, and that the wizarding world has serious flaws beneath its surface. She's 10 years old, Severus. Children that age should trust adults, should believe in fairness and justice. Children that age are being prepared for a world where Voldemort may return, where blood prejudice remains endemic, and where institutional rot goes unchallenged. I'm ensuring she won't be blindsided by reality." McGonagall's expression was troubled. "You're preparing her for war. I'm preparing her for survival." The assessment was accurate. Snape had raised Hermione as if conflict were inevitable, teaching her to recognize threats, to defend herself, to think strategically. He hadn't taught her paranoia, but he'd taught her wariness. The result was a child who was intellectually exceptional but socially isolated. Hermione had no friends her own age. The Muggle children at primary school found her strange and distant. The Wizarding World children she encountered on rare visits to Diagon Alley seemed immature and silly to her. Her only real relationship was with Snape, guardian, teacher, the person who understood her completely because he'd shaped her understanding of the magical world from first principles. "Do you think I'm strange?" she asked him one evening, after another awkward day at primary school, where she'd had nothing to say to her classmates. "I think you're different," Snape said. "Whether that's strange depends on perspective. The other children think I'm weird. They talk about television shows and games, and I don't care about any of it. I want to talk about magic, and I can't. That's the price of living between worlds. You're too magical for Muggles and too aware of Muggle reality for most wizards. It's an uncomfortable position. How do you handle it? Poorly, he admitted. I have no friends, minimal social connections, and a reputation for being unpleasant. I'm not a good model for healthy relationships, but you have me. The statement was simple, almost naive, but it struck something in Snape's chest. This child, brilliant, isolated, shaped entirely by his teaching, considered him her person, her only real connection. Yes, he said quietly, I have you. Then I don't need friends my own age. I have you, and that's enough. It shouldn't have been enough. A child needed peers, needed social development, needed relationships beyond a single adult. Snape knew this intellectually, but he couldn't bring himself to force Hermione into situations that made her uncomfortable, couldn't push her toward children who wouldn't understand her, couldn't risk her being hurt by rejection from people who didn't deserve her regard anyway. So he let her remain isolated, let her focus on magic, on learning, on becoming the most prepared 11-year-old witch in Britain. Let her develop into someone who would face Hogwarts not with wonder and excitement, but with cool assessment and strategic planning. He told himself it was for her own good, that she'd be better protected by being self-sufficient than by relying on others, that emotional independence would serve her well in a world that judged Muggle-borns harshly. But late at night, grading essays in his study while Hermione slept upstairs, Snape sometimes wondered if he was preparing her for success or simply creating a smaller version of himself, brilliant, isolated, and fundamentally disconnected from normal human relationships. July 1990. 1. The Hogwarts Letter. The letter arrived on July 24th, shortly after Hermione's 11th birthday. An owl delivered it to Spinner's End at breakfast, a tawny bird that landed on the windowsill and tapped politely at the glass. Hermione recognized it immediately. She'd been waiting for this letter for 5 years. She took the heavy parchment envelope, admiring the emerald green ink and the wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Dear Miss Granger, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall Deputy Headmistress Hermione looked up at Snape, her expression complicated. This was what they'd been working toward for 5 years, her entrance into Hogwarts, the formal beginning of her magical education. But it was also an ending. The private lessons would stop. The intensive one-on-one teaching would be replaced by classroom instruction. Well? Snape asked. Are you pleased? Yes, and nervous. And, she hesitated, will you still teach me, outside of classes? I'm your guardian and head of Slytherin House. Of course I'll continue your education, though Hogwarts will occupy most of your time. I don't want to forget everything you've taught me. I don't want to get to school and realize other students are ahead. Other students, Snape interrupted, will not be ahead of you. Trust me on this. You know more about potions than most fifth years. Your understanding of magical theory exceeds what most students achieve by graduation. You'll be fine. But what if I'm sorted into Gryffindor or Hufflepuff? What if the hat doesn't put me in Slytherin? This was the question Snape had been avoiding for months. The sorting hat would evaluate Hermione based on her values, her personality, her potential. 5 years of Snape's influence had shaped all three. The hat will place you where you belong, Snape said carefully. Whether that's Slytherin or another house, you'll succeed. But you're head of Slytherin. If I'm not in your house, then I'll still be your guardian. House placement doesn't change that. Hermione absorbed this, though she looked unconvinced. I want to be in Slytherin. I want to prove that blood status doesn't matter, that Muggle-borns can belong there too. That's an ambitious goal, Snape said dryly, and possibly dangerous. Slytherin House has certain traditions regarding blood purity. A Muggle-born Slytherin would face significant hostility. I can handle hostility. Can you? Have you ever actually faced blood prejudice? Real prejudice, not abstract discussion? She hadn't, really. Snape had sheltered her from the worst of Wizarding Society's bigotry. She'd encountered occasional odd looks in Diagon Alley, had read about blood purity ideology in books, but she'd never been called mudblood to her face, had never been treated as lesser by someone who truly believed she was lesser. I'll face it at Hogwarts regardless of my house, Hermione said. At least in Slytherin, I'd have you nearby. That's not how house politics work. If anything, being my ward might make things worse. Some will assume you're my project, proof that even Muggle-borns can be civilized through proper instruction. Others will see you as a traitor to Slytherin values, corrupting the house with impure blood. Then, what do you want me to do? Hope the hat sorts me somewhere else? I want you to understand what you're asking for. Snape leaned forward. Slytherin values ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness. You possess all three, but Slytherin also has a century of blood purity tradition. If you're sorted there, you'll be breaking that tradition simply by existing. Some students will accept you. Others will make your life difficult. Are you prepared for that? Yes. Are you prepared to be isolated, to possibly have no friends in your own house? I don't have friends now. I'll manage. The casual way she said it hurt. Snape had created this, a child so isolated that the prospect of being friendless at school didn't faze her. What if you're sorted elsewhere? He asked. Ravenclaw, perhaps. You'd fit there intellectually. I'd be fine with Ravenclaw, but I want Slytherin. She met his eyes. I want to prove that I belong in your house, Professor. That everything you've taught me wasn't wasted on someone who isn't cunning enough or ambitious enough to be a real Slytherin. You have nothing to prove to me. Maybe not to you, but to everyone else who thinks Muggle-borns are lesser? I do, and I'm going to prove it. The determination in her voice was absolute. Snape recognized it. He'd heard the same tone from himself at 11, desperate to prove he belonged at Hogwarts despite his poverty and half-blood status. Very well, he said. If the hat sorts you into Slytherin, I'll support you. But Hermione, he waited until she focused on him. If the hat offers you a choice, think carefully about what you want from your Hogwarts years. Don't choose Slytherin just to prove a point. Choose the house where you'll thrive. I will, she promised. August 1991. Preparing for Hogwarts the month before Hogwarts term was consumed by preparation. Hermione's Hogwarts letter included a supply list, and shopping for those supplies revealed the gap between Snape's intensive private tutoring and standard first-year expectations. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Gosock. Hermione read from the list in flourish and blots. Professor, I've already studied spell theory through 5th year level. Why do I need the first-year text? Because it's required, Snape said. You'll also purchase all the standard texts, even though you've already covered most of the material. The school functions on standardized curricula. Your advanced knowledge doesn't exempt you from following basic requirements. That's inefficient. Welcome to institutional education. Purchase the books. Read them if you wish, though you'll find them elementary. The real learning happens outside the classroom, in my lab, during private study, through independent research. They bought the books, the robes, the cauldron and supplies. At Ollivander's, Hermione received her wand, vine wood with a dragon heartstring core, 10 3/4 inches, unyielding. Ollivander had remarked that it was an unusual combination, that vinewood chooses those seeking higher purposes, while dragon heartstring cores are often powerful but temperamental. Like you, Snape had observed afterward. Powerful, temperamental, and convinced of your higher purpose. I'm not temperamental. You threw a book at me last week when I suggested your essay on transfiguration theory needed revision. That was a momentary lapse in judgment. Temperamental, Snape repeated, but there was something almost like affection in his voice. The final week of August, Snape sat Hermione down for a serious conversation. When you arrive at Hogwarts, he said, our relationship will change. I know, you'll be Professor Snape, not just Professor. More than that, in public, I cannot show favoritism. I'm head of Slytherin, which means if you're sorted there, I must treat you as I treat all Slytherins. Fairly, but not with special consideration. If you're sorted elsewhere, I must be even more careful. The other teachers will be watching to see if I favor you unduly. You won't be able to give me advanced lessons? I'll find ways, but they must be discreet. And Hermione, he paused, choosing words carefully. You'll meet Harry Potter at Hogwarts. The name was familiar. Hermione had read about the boy who lived, the child who'd survived the killing curse, the symbol of Voldemort's defeat. What about him? He's Lily Potter's son. The woman I told you about. The Muggle-born I failed to protect. Harry is her legacy. Do you want me to befriend him? I want you to make your own decisions about Potter. Don't judge him based on what I tell you about his father. Don't assume you know who he is based on his fame. Observe him, as you observe everyone, and decide for yourself whether he's worth your time. But you'll be watching him, because of his mother. Yes, I'll be protecting him, as I promised Dumbledore. But my protection isn't always pleasant. I have complicated feelings about James Potter's son that I won't burden you with. He stopped. Just give the boy a fair chance. He's not his father. I will, Hermione promised, though she felt complicated about it. For 5 years, she'd been Snape's only focus. Now there was this other child, the son of the woman Snape had loved, who would also require his attention. She wasn't jealous, exactly, but she was wary. She'd have to share Snape's attention with Harry Potter, navigate whatever complex emotions Snape felt about Lily's son, and potentially compete for her guardian's regard. One more thing, Snape said. The Malfoy family? The pure-blood supremacists? Yes, Lucius Malfoy and I share a history. He was my prefect at Hogwarts, and we maintained an alliance afterward. His son, Draco, will be starting Hogwarts this year. You want me to befriend him? I want you to be aware of him. Draco has been raised with blood purity ideology. He may say cruel things about Muggleborns. He may target you specifically if you're sorted into Slytherin. A mudblood in his house would offend everything he's been taught. Will you let him bully me? No. But I also can't openly favor you without political consequences. Lucius Malfoy is powerful, and our alliance is valuable. I'll have to balance protecting you with maintaining appearances. That's calculated, Hermione observed. Yes. Welcome to Slytherin politics. Everything is calculated. Every alliance serves a purpose. Even friendships are strategic. If you're sorted there, you'll need to learn this quickly. And if I'm not sorted there, then you'll still need to learn it, because Slytherin politics affect the entire school. But you'll have more freedom to choose your associations. Hermione absorbed all this. Hogwarts was starting to sound less like a school and more like a political minefield. I'm ready, she said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. You're as ready as 5 years of preparation can make you, Snape said. The rest you'll learn by experience. September 1st, 1991, King's Cross Station platform 9 3/4 was chaos. Families saying goodbye, owls hooting, students calling to each other across the platform. Hermione stood beside Snape, her trunk already loaded on the Hogwarts Express, watching the controlled chaos with apprehension. You'll write, Snape said. It wasn't a question. Every week, I promise. You'll maintain your occlumency practice. Every night, you'll remember that potions class will seem elementary compared to what we've covered. Don't show off, but don't let Gryffindors destroy my classroom either. I won't. She paused. What if I fail? What if I get to Hogwarts and everyone's better than me, and all your teaching was for nothing? You won't fail. And if by some impossible chance you do struggle with something, you'll work harder until you master it. That's who you are. Hermione looked up at him, this man who'd taken her in at age 6, who'd spent 5 years teaching her everything he knew, who'd transformed her from a frightened child into someone prepared for anything Hogwarts could throw at her. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. Snape's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You're welcome. Now go. The train leaves in 10 minutes, and you'll want to find a compartment. Hermione hugged him briefly. Affection was still uncomfortable for both of them, but they'd learned to accept small gestures, and then boarded the train. She found an empty compartment near the back and settled in with a book, watching through the window as Snape stood on the platform, a black-clad figure among the colorful families. He didn't leave until the train started moving. Even then, Hermione watched him grow smaller in the distance, this person who'd been her entire world for 5 years. The train journey passed in relative solitude. A few students peered into her compartment, but didn't enter. She was reading an advanced potions text, and didn't look particularly welcoming. She overheard conversations about Quidditch, about which houses people expected to be sorted into, about Harry Potter. When the train finally arrived at Hogsmeade Station, Hermione disembarked with the other first years, following the call of a massive man carrying a lantern. Furs years over here. The man, Hagrid, she remembered from her reading, led them down to boats that would cross the Black Lake. Hermione found herself sharing a boat with 3 nervous-looking students who didn't speak to her. And then, around a bend in the lake, Hogwarts appeared. The castle was massive, magnificent, ancient. Towers rose against the night sky. Windows glowed with light. Magic radiated from the very stones. This was it. This was where the next 7 years of her life would unfold, where she'd prove that everything Snape had taught her was worth it, where she'd show the wizarding world that a Muggle-born could be just as Slytherin as any pureblood, where she'd either thrive or fail spectacularly. No pressure, Hermione muttered to herself, and followed the other first years toward her future. The sorting ceremony. A decision that changes everything. The first years clustered nervously in the antechamber outside the Great Hall, waiting for Professor McGonagall to lead them in. Hermione stood toward the back, observing rather than participating in the anxious chatter around her. "I hope I'm in Gryffindor," a red-haired boy was saying. "All my family's been in Gryffindor. I'll probably be in Gryffindor. My father says Hufflepuff's the house for duffers," drawled a pale boy with slicked-back blonde hair. Draco Malfoy. Hermione recognized him from Snape's description, and from seeing him briefly in Diagon Alley years ago. "I expect I'll be in Ravenclaw," said a girl with dark hair. "My mum says it's the house for the cleverest students." Hermione said nothing. She'd learned from Snape that speaking first meant revealing your position before understanding the terrain. Better to observe, to assess, to wait until you understood the dynamics before committing. McGonagall returned and led them into the Great Hall. Hermione had read descriptions of this room in Hogwarts, a history, but reading couldn't prepare her for the reality. The ceiling was enchanted to look like the night sky, stars glittering, clouds drifting past. 4 long tables dominated the space, each filled with students wearing robes trimmed in house colors. At the head of the hall sat the teacher's table, and in the center, unmistakable even at a distance, was Albus Dumbledore. And there, at the end of the teacher's table, was Snape. He looked exactly as he always did, black robes, stern expression, observing the first years with the same critical assessment he brought to everything. His eyes passed over her without pause, without acknowledgement. Just as he'd said, in public, she was simply another student. The Sorting Hat sat on a stool before them. It looked old, patched, ridiculous. Then it opened its brim and began to sing. The song explained the 4 houses and their values. Hermione barely listened. She'd memorized this information years ago. What mattered was what happened next. "When I call your name," McGonagall said, "you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted." The sorting began alphabetically. Abbott, Hannah, became a Hufflepuff. Bones, Susan, also Hufflepuff. Boot, Terry, went to Ravenclaw. And then, Granger, Hermione. Hermione walked forward, aware of every eye in the hall on her. She sat on the stool, and McGonagall placed the hat on her head. It was heavier than she expected. And then a voice spoke in her ear, not out loud, but inside her mind. "Well, well," the hat said. "What have we here? A Muggle-born raised by Severus Snape himself. Most unusual. Most interesting indeed. Please sort me quickly," Hermione thought. "Everyone's staring. Patience, child. This is not a decision to be made lightly." The hat seemed to be rifling through her memories, her personality, her values. "You've got cleverness, certainly. Ravenclaw would suit you well. That mind of yours is extraordinary. Most first years don't arrive knowing Newt-level potions theory. I'd do well in Ravenclaw," Hermione acknowledged. But you want Slytherin," the hat finished. "Why? To prove something? To stay close to your guardian? Or because you truly value what Slytherin represents?" "All of those reasons," Hermione thought honestly. "And because I'm ambitious. I want to be the best. I want to prove that blood means nothing, that a Muggle-born can be just as Slytherin as any pure blood. I want to change what people think Slytherin means. Ambitious indeed, and cunning, you've learned well from Snape. You know when to speak and when to observe. You understand that information is power, that alliances are strategic, that the world is more complex than simple good and evil." The hat paused. "But Slytherin House will not be easy for you. You'll face hostility, prejudice, perhaps even danger. A Muggle-born Slytherin breaks centuries of tradition. I can handle it. Can you? Have you ever faced real blood prejudice? Snape sheltered you from the worst of it." "Then it's time I learned," Hermione thought firmly. "I can't hide forever. And if I'm going to face prejudice, I'd rather do it in a house where I can prove everyone wrong." The hat was quiet for a long moment. Then it chuckled, a dry, papery sound. "Very well. You've convinced me. Though, don't say I didn't warn you. Better be SYTIN. The last word was shouted to the hall. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the Slytherin table erupted, not in cheers, but in confused muttering. Hermione walked toward the table, her chin up, refusing to show uncertainty. She sat at the end of the bench, and the sorting continued around her while Slytherins whispered, "A mudblood in Slytherin. That's Snape's ward, the one he's been teaching. My father says it's a disgrace. Dumbledore must have interfered. The hat's never been wrong before. Maybe there's a reason." Hermione ignored the whispers and watched the rest of the sorting. Malfoy, Draco, went to Slytherin. No surprise there. The boys swaggered to the table and deliberately sat far from Hermione. Not Theodore, also Slytherin. Parkinson, Pansy, Slytherin. And then Potter, Harry. Every head in the hall turned. Hermione watched with particular attention as a skinny boy with messy black hair and glasses walked forward. This was Lily Potter's son, the boy Snape protected while despising. The boy who lived. The hat took much longer with Harry than it had with most students. Nearly 5 minutes passed, a true hat stall. Finally, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table exploded with cheers. Harry looked relieved as he joined them. Hermione filed the information away. The hat had considered other options for Potter. Interesting. The sorting finished. Dumbledore stood to give his start-of-term notices, warnings about the Forbidden Forest, the third-floor corridor, announcement of the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Then the feast began. Food appeared on the tables, more food than Hermione had seen in one place. Roast beef, chicken, pork chops, vegetables, Yorkshire pudding, everything imaginable. The Slytherin students loaded their plates and began eating, still casting suspicious glances at Hermione. Finally, a prefect, a tall fifth-year boy, addressed her directly. "Granger, you're Snape's ward." "Yes." "Is it true you've been living with him since you were 6? "Yes." "And he's been teaching you magic all this time?" "Yes." The prefect, his badge read Montague, studied her. "Then you probably know more than most of us about potions. And dark arts, I'd imagine." "I know some things," Hermione said carefully. Snape had warned her about revealing too much too quickly. "Well, don't expect special treatment just because Professor Snape is your guardian. Slytherin values merit, not connections. I don't want special treatment. I want to be evaluated on my abilities like everyone else." Montague nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Fair enough. Welcome to Slytherin, Granger. Try not to get us all cursed by association with mudblood status." The slur was casual, almost reflexive. Hermione's hands clenched under the table. But she kept her expression neutral. This was what she'd signed up for. This was Slytherin house reality. "I'll do my best," she said evenly. The Slytherin common room. First night after the feast, the Slytherin prefects led the first years down to the dungeons. The common room entrance was hidden behind a bare stretch of wall. The prefect gave the password, "Pure Blood," and Hermione noted the irony with dark amusement. The common room was exactly as Snape had described, low-ceilinged, dungeon-like, with greenish lamps and chairs upholstered in green and silver. Large windows looked out into the lake. Hermione could see fish and occasionally the giant squid drifting past. "First-year boys, your dormitory is through that door," Montague pointed. "Girls, the other door. Organize yourselves. Lights out is at 10 o'clock. Professor Snape will address the house tomorrow morning before breakfast." The first-year girls' dormitory contained 5 four-poster beds with green silk hangings. Hermione's trunk was already at the foot of one bed. The other first-year Slytherin girls were Pansy Parkinson, Millicent Bulstrode, Daphne Greengrass, and Tracy Davis. Pansy looked at Hermione with undisguised contempt. "A mudblood in Slytherin. My father will be furious when he hears about this." "Then don't tell him," Hermione suggested mildly. "As if I have a choice. Everyone will know. This is a disgrace to the house. The hat sorted me here. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the hat." "The hat made a mistake," Pansy insisted. "Or Snape interfered somehow. There's no way a mudblood belongs in Slytherin." Hermione had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. She'd known blood prejudice would be immediate and harsh. What she hadn't prepared for was how much it would hurt to hear it from someone who would be living in her dormitory, sharing her space for the next 7 years. "My blood status," Hermione said quietly, "doesn't determine my abilities or my worth. If you think it does, you're not as intelligent as Slytherin supposedly values." "How dare you?" "That's enough," Daphne Greengrass interrupted. She was a pretty girl with straight blonde hair and cool gray eyes. "Pansy, arguing about this won't change the sorting. Granger is here. We might as well accept it." I don't have to accept anything. You don't, Daphne agreed. But causing drama on the first night is tedious. I'd like to sleep. She turned to Hermione. Granger, I assume Snape taught you about house politics? Some. Then you know that Slytherin operates on reputation and alliances. You're starting with a disadvantage. Your blood status offends half the house on principle. If you want to survive here, you'll need to prove you're worth tolerating despite it. Understand? Perfectly, Hermione said. Good. I won't be your friend, but I won't be your enemy either. Stay out of my way, don't make Slytherin look bad, and we'll coexist. It was the most neutral response Hermione could have hoped for. Agreed. The girls prepared for bed in tense silence. Hermione changed into her nightclothes, washed in the adjoining bathroom, and climbed into her four-poster. The bed was comfortable, better than her bed at Spinner's End, but sleep wouldn't come easily. She lay in the darkness, listening to the other girls settle in, hearing Pansy whisper to Millicent about the mudblood situation, and felt the weight of what she'd chosen. 5 years with Snape had prepared her for magical theory, for potions expertise, for understanding dark arts, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the reality of being the only muggle born in a house built on blood purity ideology. She pulled out her wand, vine wood and dragon heartstring, and held it, taking comfort in its familiar weight. This was just the first night. Tomorrow would bring classes, routines, opportunities to prove herself. She could handle this. She had to. September 2nd, meeting Harry Potter breakfast the next morning was tense. Hermione sat at the Slytherin table, aware that students from other houses were staring at her. News had spread. There was a muggle born in Slytherin. It was unprecedented. Scandalous. Impossible. The Daily Prophet arrived via owl post. Hermione's father had sent her a subscription so she could follow wizarding news. She unfolded the paper and found a small article on page 3. Unpreceded sorting. Muggle-born placed in Slytherin house. In a shocking development, Hermione Granger, Ward of Potions, Master Severus Snape, was sorted into Slytherin house last night. This marks the first confirmed instance of a Muggle-born student being placed in Slytherin in over a century. Professor Snape declined to comment. Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore stated only that the Sorting Hat's decisions are final and reflect each student's true nature, so it was already public. Wonderful. Snape appeared at the head table, swept his gaze over the Slytherin table without acknowledging Hermione specifically, and began eating. This was the new normal. She'd see him every day, but he couldn't show favoritism. She was just another student. After breakfast, Snape did address the Slytherin house, a traditional first morning speech in the common room. I am Professor Snape, head of Slytherin house, he said, his voice cold and carrying. Slytherin has a reputation for producing powerful wizards and witches. We also have a reputation for cunning, ambition, and resourcefulness. You will uphold these qualities, or you will face consequences. His eyes swept over them all, pausing fractionally on Hermione before moving on. House unity is essential. Slytherin students support each other, regardless of personal differences. You will not air house business to other houses. You will not undermine each other publicly. You will present a unified front to the rest of the school. He let that sink in, then continued. Regarding the unusual sorting this year, the Hat's decisions are final. Miss Granger is a Slytherin. She will be treated as a Slytherin. Anyone who causes problems regarding blood status will answer to me. Understood? Muttered agreements rippled through the room. Snape's warning was clear. He wouldn't tolerate open hostility toward Hermione. But that didn't mean he'd prevent subtle harassment or social isolation. First years, you'll receive your timetables shortly. Classes begin at 9 o'clock. Don't be late. He swept from the room, robes billowing. The timetables arrived via prefects. Hermione examined hers. Potions on Fridays with Gryffindor, Transfiguration with Ravenclaw, Charms with Hufflepuff, and various other combinations. Her first class this morning was Transfiguration with Ravenclaw. She gathered her books and headed to McGonagall's classroom, arriving early as was her habit. A few Ravenclaw students were already there, including the dark-haired girl from the sorting who'd mentioned being clever, Padma Patil, according to her badge. You're Granger, Padma observed. The Slytherin Muggle-born. That's me. Is it true Professor Snape raised you? He's my guardian, yes. That must be strange. Everyone says he's horrible in class. He has high standards, Hermione said neutrally. More students arrived, including a bushy-haired boy who immediately approached Hermione. "I'm Terry Boot, Ravenclaw. I have about 100 questions about what it's like being taught by Snape for 5 years." "That's a lot of questions. Start with the basics. Did he teach you potions? Among other things. What's his teaching style like? Is he really as strict as everyone says? Do you know everything about potions already? Can you brew polyjuice potion? What about veritaserum?" Hermione blinked at the rapid-fire questions. This was the first student who'd approached her with genuine curiosity rather than hostility or wariness. "He's strict," she answered carefully. "His teaching style focuses on precision and understanding theory before practice. I know advanced potions theory, but I'm not skilled enough to brew complex potions independently yet. And no, I can't brew veritaserum. That's newt level and highly regulated. But you know more than the first-year curriculum? Yes, that's brilliant. You could probably help." "Mr. Boot," Professor McGonagall's stern voice cut through the conversation. She'd entered the classroom while they were talking. "Please take your seat. Class is beginning." Terry scrambled to sit. McGonagall surveyed the assembled first-years, a mix of Slytherin and Ravenclaw, with her sharp eyes. "Transfiguration," she said, "is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned." She transformed her desk into a pig and back again to demonstrate the principle, then launched into a lecture on basic transfiguration theory. Hermione took notes automatically, but the material was elementary. She'd covered this with Snape years ago. After the lecture, McGonagall distributed matches and instructed them to turn the matches into needles. It was standard first lesson material, designed to be challenging but not impossible. Hermione completed the transformation on her third attempt, not because it was particularly difficult, but because she made a show of trying twice before succeeding. Snape had warned her about showing off too early. McGonagall examined the needle. "Excellent work, Miss Granger. 5 points to Slytherin." Several Slytherin students looked surprised. Points for their house from a Gryffindor head of house, earned by a Muggle-born. The dynamics were already complicated. After Transfiguration came History of Magic with Professor Binns, a ghost who droned through a lecture so boring that half the students fell asleep. Hermione stayed awake through sheer discipline, but she understood why Snape had called this class a waste of time. Lunch in the Great Hall brought another encounter. Hermione was sitting at the Slytherin table, reading while eating, when someone sat across from her. She looked up. "Harry Potter." "Hi," Harry said. He looked uncertain but determined. "I'm Harry Potter." "I know who you are," Hermione said. "Everyone knows who you are." "Right, obviously." He seemed embarrassed. I wanted to introduce myself." "You're Hermione Granger, Professor Snape's ward." "Yes. That must be interesting." "It's been educational." Hermione studied him carefully. He looked nothing like the descriptions she'd read. No arrogance, no assumption of specialness. He just looked like an awkward 11-year-old trying to be friendly. "Why are you talking to me?" "Why not? You're a first year, same as me. And you're in a tricky position. First Muggle-born Slytherin ever. That can't be easy." "It's not. But I knew what I was choosing when I asked the hat to put me there." "You asked for Slytherin? Why?" Hermione considered how to answer. "Because I'm ambitious. Because I want to prove that blood status doesn't determine house placement. Because my guardian is head of Slytherin, and I wanted to honor his teaching." Harry absorbed this. "Professor Snape really raised you? Since you were 6? "Yes." "What's that like?" "Everyone says he's terrifying. He has high standards and doesn't tolerate incompetence. But he's fair, and he's brilliant, the best potions master in Britain. Possibly in Europe." "You sound like you admire him." "I do. He saved my life and taught me everything I know about magic." Why wouldn't I admire him? This was clearly not the response Harry expected. "It's just, in class yesterday, he was really harsh. Took points from Gryffindor for no reason. Insulted Neville when he made a mistake. He seems cruel." Hermione's instinct was to defend Snape immediately, but she forced herself to pause, to remember Snape's own words. "Give the boy a fair chance. Don't just parrot my opinions." "Professor Snape's classroom manner is harsh," she acknowledged. "But he's not cruel for cruelty's sake. He pushes students because potions is dangerous. Mistakes can cause injuries or deaths. His standards are high because the subject demands precision. That doesn't excuse being mean to 11-year-olds. No, Hermione agreed. It doesn't. But you asked what he's like. That's what he's like. Demanding, harsh, but ultimately trying to teach properly even if his methods are uncomfortable. Harry studied her for a moment. You really believe that? I've known him for 5 years. You've known him for 2 days. I think my assessment might be more accurate. Fair point. Harry glanced at the Gryffindor table, where a red-haired boy, Ron Weasley, Hermione remembered, was watching them with confusion. I should probably get back, but it was nice meeting you. I hope Slytherin House isn't too awful. It's manageable, Hermione said, which was the politest way to describe the hostility she'd been navigating. If you ever need, I don't know, if things get bad, you can talk to me. I know what it's like to not fit in. The offer was genuine and unexpected. Hermione felt something shift in her assessment of Harry Potter. Lily's son wasn't arrogant or cruel. He was kind, awkwardly, earnestly kind. Thank you, she said. I'll remember that. Harry nodded and returned to Gryffindor table. Hermione noticed several Slytherins staring at her. Talking to Harry Potter was apparently suspicious behavior. She returned to her book and tried to ignore the whispers. Friday. First Potions class Friday brought the class Hermione had been simultaneously anticipating and dreading. Potions, with Professor Snape. The Slytherin first years gathered outside the Potions classroom in the dungeons, waiting for the Gryffindors to arrive. When they did, Hermione immediately noticed Harry and Ron Weasley standing together. Snape swept out of the classroom exactly on time, his presence commanding immediate silence. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, he began, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying perfectly through the corridor. As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron, with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. Hermione knew this speech. She'd heard variations of it for 5 years, but hearing it delivered to a class, watching the other students' reactions, some awed, some frightened, some confused, she understood its purpose. Snape was establishing authority, setting expectations, making clear that potions was serious business. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop her death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach. The students filed into the classroom and took seats. Hermione deliberately sat at a middle desk, not in the front, too obvious, or the back, too hiding. Snape began taking roll, his voice flat and bored until he reached a particular name. Ah yes, Harry Potter, our new celebrity. Hermione winced internally. Snape couldn't help himself. The venom was immediate and obvious. She watched Harry's expression, close off, watched him retreat behind walls of self-protection. Snape continued the role without further comment, then launched into his first lesson, a quiz designed to establish how much or little students knew. Potter? Snape barked, suddenly. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hermione knew the answer. She'd known it since age 7, but she kept her hand down, watching. Harry looked blank. I don't know, sir. Tut tut. Fame clearly isn't everything. Snape's voice dripped contempt. Let's try again. Potter, where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? I don't know, sir. Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, eh, Potter? I did read the book, Harry started. One more chance. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? I don't know, sir. But I think Hermione does. Why don't you try asking her? The classroom went silent. Students held their breath. No one spoke back to Snape in potions class. Snape's expression went dangerous. Detention, Potter. For insolence. 5 points from Gryffindor. His eyes flicked to Hermione. Well, Miss Granger, since Potter has nominated you to answer, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hermione stood slowly. It was protocol when answering Snape's questions. The draught of living death, Professor. A powerful sleeping potion. Correct. And a bezoar? A stone from a goat's stomach. It can save someone from most poisons. Correct. Monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, Professor, also known as aconite. Correct. Snape's voice was cold. 3 points to Slytherin. Sit down, Miss Granger. He turned to the rest of the class. All of you should have known those answers. They were in your textbooks, which you were supposed to have read. Since clearly most of you didn't bother, we'll spend today brewing a simple potion to cure boils. Instructions are on the board. Begin. The rest of the lesson was tense. Hermione brewed her cure for boils perfectly. Snape examined it and gave a curt nod before moving on without comment. Meanwhile, Neville Longbottom somehow managed to melt his cauldron, causing chaos and earning a storm of Snape's fury. When class ended, Harry approached Hermione in the corridor outside. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have pointed you out like that. I was angry at Snape and I used you to make a point. That was wrong." Hermione appreciated the apology. "It's fine. You're right that I knew the answers. But you put both of us in an uncomfortable position." "I know. I'll be more careful." Harry hesitated. "Is he always like that? Targeting students who don't know things?" "He's always demanding," Hermione said carefully. "And he's particularly hard on students he thinks aren't trying. Whether that's fair is debatable." "He hates me," Harry said flatly. "I don't know why, but he hates me." Hermione knew why. Knew about Lily and James, about Snape's complicated feelings toward Harry's father, about the love and resentment all tangled together. But she couldn't tell Harry that. "Professor Snape is complicated," she said instead. "Give him time. Maybe he'll warm up to you." Even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Snape would never warm up to Harry Potter. The best Harry could hope for was professional distance instead of active hostility. "I doubt it," Harry said, "but thanks anyway, for not being awful about this whole mess. You're welcome." October. Navigating social dynamics, the first month of term established patterns that would define Hermione's Hogwarts experience. In Slytherin House, she existed in a state of cold tolerance. The boys mostly ignored her. Draco Malfoy made occasional sneering comments about mudbloods defiling the house, but Snape's warning about house unity kept the hostility mostly verbal. Theodore Nott was coolly polite. Blaise Zabini seemed genuinely indifferent to blood status and treated her as he treated everyone, with mild disdain. The girls were more complicated. Pansy Parkinson's hostility never abated. She made constant comments about blood purity, about how Hermione didn't belong, about how Professor Snape must have been forced to take her in. Millicent Bulstrode followed Pansy's lead without much independent thought. But Daphne Greengrass kept her word about neutrality. She didn't befriend Hermione, but she didn't participate in harassment either. Tracy Davis was similar, cautiously neutral, waiting to see how things developed. "You're handling this better than I expected," Daphne observed one evening in the common room. They were both working on Transfiguration homework, and most of the other students had gone to bed. Handling what? Being the house pariah? Most people would have broken down or transferred houses by now. "I don't break easily," Hermione said, "and I chose Slytherin knowing it would be difficult. Giving up now would validate everyone who said I didn't belong." "That's very Slytherin of you." Pride and stubbornness. "Thank you." It wasn't necessarily a compliment. Daphne looked at her thoughtfully. "You're actually quite Slytherin, beyond the blood status issue. Strategic, ambitious, calculating. You've been watching everyone, figuring out the social dynamics, choosing carefully when to speak and when to stay silent. Professor Snape taught me that information is power. He taught you well. Most first years don't understand house politics for months. You understood within days." Hermione filed that assessment away. Daphne Greengrass was worth cultivating as a potential ally, not a friend, necessarily, but someone who respected competence over blood. With other houses, dynamics were different. The Ravenclaws were curious about her. Terry Boot continued asking questions about Snape's teaching methods whenever they had classes together. Padma Paddle invited her to study sessions, which Hermione attended when the social isolation in Slytherin became too oppressive. The Hufflepuffs were cautiously kind. Hannah Abbott and Susan Bones both made efforts to include Hermione in casual conversations, though they seemed baffled by her reserved manner. The Gryffindors were the most complicated. Harry continued to be friendly despite the house divide. He'd wave to her in corridors, save her a seat at meals when she was eating alone, ask how she was doing. Ron Weasley was less welcoming. He seemed suspicious of any Slytherin, and Hermione's connection to Snape made her doubly suspect. "Why are you friends with her?" Hermione overheard Ron asking Harry one day. "She's a Slytherin. They're all dark wizards and blood purists. She's not like that," Harry defended. "She's actually really nice and smart. You should give her a chance. She's Snape's ward. That makes her automatically suspect. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Snape's a git, and anyone he raised is probably a git too. Hermione walked away before she could hear Harry's response. She shouldn't care what Ron Weasley thought. But it hurt anyway, knowing that her connection to Snape made her automatically untrustworthy in some people's eyes. Halloween. The troll incident Halloween brought the incident that would have defined Hermione's friendship with Harry and Ron in canon. But this version unfolded differently. Hermione had no reason to be crying in a bathroom. She hadn't been insulted by Ron. She barely interacted with him. She spent Halloween working on her charms essay in the Slytherin common room, unbothered by the feast happening upstairs. When Professor Quirrell burst into the Great Hall screaming about a troll in the dungeons, Hermione was one corridor away. She heard the screaming before she saw anything. Students were being evacuated by prefects, everyone rushing toward their common rooms. Hermione followed the Slytherin group, but when they passed a side corridor, she caught a flash of movement. The troll was massive, 12 feet tall, its skin a dull granite gray, its small eyes stupid but dangerous. It was holding a wooden club and shuffling toward the main corridor, where students were fleeing. Hermione's first instinct was Snape's training. Assess the threat, evaluate your options, act strategically. She couldn't fight a troll. She was 11 and had been using a wand for less than 2 months. But she could distract it, redirect it, buy time for students to escape. She levitated a piece of fallen stonework, Wingardium Leviosa, and sent it crashing into the troll's back. The creature turned, confused, looking for the source of the impact. "This way," Hermione shouted, backing down a different corridor. "Come on." The troll followed. Hermione led it away from the main student group, her heart pounding, her mind calculating. She needed to get it somewhere contained, somewhere teachers could handle it without endangering students. She led it toward an empty classroom. But before she could execute her plan, Harry and Ron appeared. "Hermione," Harry shouted, "what are you doing?" "Leading it away from the other students. Help me get it into this classroom." The boys joined her without question. Together, they managed to distract the troll long enough to lure it into the classroom. Ron used the levitation charm to drop the club on the troll's head, knocking it unconscious just as McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell arrived. "What is the meaning of this?" McGonagall's voice was sharp with fear and anger. "You 3 could have been killed." "I'm sorry, Professor," Hermione said quickly. She knew the protocol from Snape's lessons. Take responsibility, show contrition, minimize consequences. "I saw the troll heading toward the students being evacuated. I thought I could distract it while everyone got to safety. Harry and Ron came to help." "That was incredibly foolish," McGonagall said. 5 points will be taken from Slytherin for your dangerous actions, Miss Granger. And 10 points each will be awarded to Gryffindor," she continued, looking at Harry and Ron. "For helping a fellow student in danger? Now all of you, go to your dormitories immediately." They left. In the corridor outside, Ron looked at Hermione with new eyes. "That was brilliant," Ron said. "The way you led it away from everyone." "It was the logical thing to do," Hermione said, uncomfortable with praise. "Still brilliant. I'm sorry I've been a git about the Slytherin thing." "You're all right. Thank you," Hermione said, unsure how to respond to this sudden shift. Harry grinned. "So, are we friends now?" "Officially?" Hermione considered. She'd been at Hogwarts for 2 months and had no real friends, just tentative alliances and strategic neutrality. Harry and Ron were Gryffindors, which meant associating with them would make her position in Slytherin more complicated. But they just fought a troll together. That created bonds. "Yes," she said. "I suppose we are." November. The complications deepen. Being friends with Harry Potter and Ron Weasley created exactly the complications Hermione expected. The Slytherin students noticed immediately that she ate lunch at the Gryffindor table sometimes, that she studied with Harry in the library, that she spent time with the enemy house. "Fraternizing with Gryffindors," Draco sneered one evening in the common room. "I suppose we shouldn't expect loyalty from a mudblood. I'm allowed to have friends from other houses," Hermione said evenly. "House unity doesn't mean isolation from the rest of the school. It means not cozying up to Potter. My father says, your father says many things. Not all of them are correct." Draco's face went red. "How dare you?" "That's enough," Daphne Greengrass interrupted. "Draco, leave her alone. Granger, stop antagonizing him." Both of them subsided. But the message was clear. Hermione's friendship with Harry was controversial within Slytherin House. More complicated was Snape's reaction. He gave no indication in class that he'd noticed Hermione's new friendships, but one evening in late November, she received a note via house elf. My office. 8 p.m. SS Hermione arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. Snape's office was exactly as she remembered from visits during childhood. Shelves of preserved specimens, jars of ingredients, the same cramped functionality. Sit, Snape said without preamble. She sat. You've been spending considerable time with Harry Potter. Yes, Professor. Why? Because he's kind, intelligent, and treats me like a person rather than a blood status. And because you told me to give him a fair chance. I told you to observe him and make your own judgments. I didn't tell you to become his friend. Are you ordering me not to be friends with him? Snape was silent for a long moment. No. You're old enough to choose your own associations. But I want you to understand the complications. I understand that being friends with Harry makes me more of a target in Slytherin House. I understand that some people will assume I'm spying for you. I understand all of it, Professor. I'm choosing friendship anyway. The boy is reckless. He attracts danger. Being close to him puts you at risk. I've been at risk since birth. Being Muggle-born already makes me a target if Voldemort returns. Being your ward makes me a target for Death Eaters. Being friends with Harry doesn't change my risk profile significantly. You sound like me when you talk like that. Good, you raised me. Snape's expression flickered, something almost like pride, quickly suppressed. How are you managing in Slytherin House? It's tolerable. Pansy Parkinson is hostile. Draco Malfoy makes comments. But I have tentative alliances with Daphne Greengrass and Tracy Davis. Theodore Knott is neutral. I'm managing. And the blood status issue? People call me Mudblood regularly. I've learned to ignore it. That's not an answer. Hermione met his eyes. It hurts every time. But showing that it hurts would give them power over me, so I don't show it. That's very Slytherin and very unhealthy. You do the same thing. You've spent years teaching students who consider you a half-blood traitor, and you show nothing. And I'm an excellent model of healthy emotional processing, Snape said dryly. Hermione, I'm not telling you to display weakness, but you need to acknowledge, at least to yourself, that the constant hostility takes a toll. Don't pretend it doesn't affect you. I'll keep that in mind, Professor. Good. He pulled a box from his desk. I have something for you. Inside the box was a set of advanced potions texts, 6th and 7th year level, some in languages other than English. Continue your education, Snape said. Hogwarts curriculum is adequate for average students. You're not average. These texts will ensure you don't stagnate. Thank you, Professor. And Hermione, regarding Potter, if your friendship with him becomes dangerous, if he leads you into situations you're not prepared for, come to me. I'll intervene if necessary. I can handle myself. I know. But you don't have to handle everything alone. It was the closest Snape had come to expressing affection since term started. Hermione felt her throat tighten. I'll remember that, she said. See that you do. Now go. It's past curfew, and I'd rather not have to give my own ward detention for breaking rules. Hermione left with the books, feeling the familiar mix of frustration and gratitude that Snape always inspired. He was harsh, demanding, emotionally distant. He was also the only person who'd ever believed in her completely, who'd taught her everything she knew, who'd given her a second chance at life. She could handle Slytherin hostility. She could handle Harry's recklessness. She could handle anything Hogwarts threw at her, because Severus Snape had raised her to be unbreakable. December. The Philosopher's Stone investigation. By December, Harry had become convinced that someone was trying to steal something hidden at Hogwarts. He'd seen Snape's injured leg after Halloween, had noticed suspicious behavior from various teachers, and had connected it to the break-in at Gringotts. He told Hermione and Ron his theory during a study session in the library. Something's hidden on the 3rd floor, Harry said. Something important enough that Dumbledore is protecting it, and I think Snape's trying to steal it. Hermione's stomach dropped. What makes you think that? His leg was bleeding on Halloween. He must have been trying to get past that 3-headed dog, Fluffy, Hermione supplied automatically. You know about the dog? Professor Snape mentioned it years ago. It belongs to Hagrid. Its name is Fluffy. Well, Snape tried to get past Fluffy and got bitten. He's after whatever the dog is guarding. That's circumstantial evidence at best, Hermione said, her mind racing. Snape would never steal from Hogwarts. If he'd been bitten by Fluffy, It was because he was protecting whatever was hidden, not stealing it. But she couldn't say that without revealing information she shouldn't have. It's more than circumstantial, Ron argued. Snape's always been dodgy. Everyone knows it. Everyone thinks they know it, Hermione corrected. That doesn't make it true. Why are you defending him? Harry asked. I know he's your guardian, but objectively he's suspicious. Objectively, you have no evidence beyond an injured leg and your personal dislike of Professor Snape. Hermione, whose side are you on? The question hung in the air. Hermione felt the weight of divided loyalties, her guardian versus her friends, truth versus perception. I'm on the side of not making accusations without evidence, she said finally. If someone is trying to steal something from Hogwarts, we should gather actual proof before assuming it's Professor Snape. Fine, Harry said. Then help us investigate. Help us figure out what's really going on. This was the choice point. Hermione could refuse, could distance herself from whatever trouble Harry was courting. Or she could participate, could try to guide the investigation away from false accusations against Snape while protecting her friends from actual danger. I'll help, she said. But we do this intelligently. No running off half-cocked. We research, we plan, we act carefully. Agreed, Harry said, looking relieved. Over the next weeks, the three of them investigated. Hermione quickly identified what was being protected. The Philosopher's Stone, Nicholas Flamel's legendary creation that produced the elixir of life. She explained the significance to Harry and Ron, who were appropriately awed. If someone steals that, they could live forever, Ron breathed. Or return someone to life, Harry added. Like Voldemort. Exactly, Hermione said. Which is why it's being protected. Multiple teachers have contributed protection, probably Dumbledore's idea, a series of challenges that would stop most thieves. Then we need to figure out who's trying to steal it and stop them. Hermione watched Snape carefully over the following weeks. His behavior was tense but not suspicious. He seemed to be watching someone else, monitoring for threats. She realized with sudden clarity, Snape wasn't the thief. He was protecting against the thief. But convincing Harry of that was impossible. Harry's prejudice against Snape was too deep, reinforced by Snape's classroom cruelty. Christmas break. Conversations at Spinner's End. Hermione spent Christmas at Spinner's End with Snape. Harry and Ron both stayed at Hogwarts, but she wanted time with her guardian away from the complications of school. Christmas morning, Snape gave her a set of rare potions ingredients and a book on advanced occlumency techniques. She gave him a set of expensive quills he'd never buy for himself, and a potions journal she'd spent weeks researching. They ate breakfast together. Snape was a marginally better cook than he'd been 6 years ago, and discussed the term. You've made friends, Snape observed. Potter and Weasley. Yes. Despite the complications. How do you find Potter? Honestly, Hermione considered her answer carefully. He's kind, brave, reckless. He has a saving people thing that's going to get him killed someday. But he's genuine. There's no artifice in him. No calculated cruelty. He's nothing like his father, Professor. Nothing like the bully you described. Snape was quiet for a long moment. That's good. Lily would be glad her son inherited her best qualities. Tell me about her. About Lily. Why? Because she's important to you. Because Harry is my friend and I want to understand his mother. Because you've never actually told me the full story. Snape stared into his coffee for so long that Hermione thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak. He told her about meeting Lily on the playground, about their friendship before Hogwarts, about how she'd been brilliant and kind and the only person who'd ever truly understood him. He told her about the slow dissolution of their friendship at Hogwarts, about his attraction to dark magic and blood purity ideology, about the moment he'd called her mudblood and destroyed everything. He told her about loving her from a distance, about watching James Potter steal her, about joining the Death Eaters partly from ideology, but partly from rage and jealousy, about hearing the prophecy and reporting it to Voldemort, about realizing too late that Voldemort had targeted Lily, about begging Dumbledore to save her. I traded my freedom for her safety, Snape said, his voice hollow. I became Dumbledore's spy, his weapon, his chess piece, anything if he'd protect her. But it wasn't enough. She died anyway, and I've spent every day since trying to atone for the role I played in her death. Is that why you took me in? Because I remind you of her? Partly. You're Muggle-born, brilliant, exceptional, everything Lily was. Raising you is proof that I can protect someone like her, that I can give a muggle-born child what Lily never had. He looked at her directly. But Hermione, you're not just a replacement for Lily. You're yourself. I raised you because you deserved to be raised, because you needed protection and teaching, because you're worth saving independent of anyone else. Do you see her when you look at me? Sometimes. But I also see you, and I'm proud of what you've become, regardless of who you remind me of. It was the most emotionally open Hermione had ever seen Snape. She felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she said, for telling me, for trusting me with this. You deserved to know. And Hermione, when Potter eventually learns that I loved his mother, that I'm the reason she died, he'll hate me. He'll probably try to turn you against me. I need you to know the truth first, so you can make your own judgment. I already know my judgment. You made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But you've spent 13 years atoning. You saved me. You taught me. You're not the person you were at 20. And I won't turn against you because of your past. Even if your friends demand it? Even then. June. The final confrontation, the Philosopher's Stone crisis, came to a head in June, exactly as in canon. But with Hermione's presence changing the dynamics. When Harry realized Quirrell was going after the stone that night, he told Hermione and Ron immediately. Hermione knew they should tell Snape, should get adult help. But Harry was adamant. There's no time. By the time we convince someone, Quirrell could have it. We have to go now. This is insane, Hermione said. But she went anyway, because Harry was her friend, and he was walking into danger. They navigated the protections. Fluffy. Hermione knew about Devil's Snare from Snape's teaching. The flying keys. Harry caught one easily. The chess game. Ron sacrificed himself brilliantly. And Snape's logic puzzle. This is brilliant, Hermione said, studying the potions. 7 bottles, only 2 safe to drink. The logic puzzle determines which is which. Can you solve it? Harry asked. Of course, Professor Snape taught me logic puzzles when I was 7. She worked through the problem, identifying the potion that would let Harry proceed. This one goes forward. This one goes back. There's only enough in each for one person. Then I'll go alone, Harry said. You go back and get help. Harry, Hermione, if something happens to me, someone needs to tell them what we found. Promise me you'll get help. She didn't want to leave him, but the logic was sound. I promise. She took the backwards potion and returned through the flames, running back through the challenges to find help. She found Snape in the entrance hall, clearly searching for something. Professor, she gasped. Harry's gone after the stone. Quirrell's trying to steal it. Snape's expression went from surprise to horror to determination in seconds. Stay here. Alert, Dumbledore. Don't follow me. He ran toward the 3rd floor. Hermione ignored his instructions and followed at a distance. When she reached the final chamber, she found chaos. Harry was on the ground, unconscious. Quirrell's body was turning to ash. Snape was standing over Harry, checking his pulse with fingers that shook slightly. He's alive, Snape said, seeing Hermione. Unconscious, but alive. The protection his mother left him. It destroyed Quirrell when the professor tried to touch him. The stone? Destroyed. Dumbledore will be here any moment. Hermione, he looked at her seriously. You shouldn't have followed Potter into this. He's my friend. I couldn't let him face it alone. You could have. You should have. But you didn't, because you're too much like me, loyal to a fault, willing to risk everything for the people you love. His voice softened. At least you had the sense to get help instead of charging in blindly. I learned from the best teacher. Dumbledore arrived then, along with McGonagall and several other professors. They took over the scene, moving Harry to the hospital wing, questioning Hermione about what happened. In the aftermath, house points were awarded. Hermione received 50 points for Slytherin, for quick thinking and seeking help. Ron received 50 for Gryffindor for the chess game. Harry received 60 for facing Voldemort and winning. It wasn't enough to win Slytherin the House Cup. Gryffindor won by a narrow margin. But it was proof that a Muggle-born Slytherin could contribute to house success. More importantly, it was proof that Snape had been protecting the stone, not stealing it. Harry never fully apologized for suspecting Snape. His prejudice was too ingrained. But Hermione saw him look at her guardian differently after that night. With less automatic hostility, more confusion, the beginning of understanding that Snape was more complicated than he appeared. End of year, reflections on the train ride home, Hermione sat with Harry and Ron, reflecting on the year. Next year will be different, Harry said. Now that we know each other, now that we've fought together, it'll be easier. Maybe, Hermione said. Or maybe new complications will arise. Always the optimist, Ron teased. Always the realist, Hermione corrected. At King's Cross, the Grangers were waiting for Hermione. So was Snape, standing apart from other parents, black-clad and severe. "I'll see you next term," Hermione told Harry and Ron. "Write to us," Harry said. "Don't spend the whole summer studying." "I'll write," she promised. "But I'm definitely spending most of the summer studying." She found Snape, and together they left the platform. In the car ride to Crawley, they were dropping her with her parents for 2 weeks before she'd return to Spinner's End. Snape asked the question she'd been expecting. "Well, was Hogwarts everything you hoped?" "It was more complicated," Hermione said honestly. "The blood prejudice is worse than I imagined. The social dynamics are exhausting. The classes are mostly too easy except for the practical applications. But I made friends, real friends, and I proved I could survive Slytherin as a Muggle-born." "You did more than survive. You thrived. 50 house points, top grades in every subject, and you helped defeat a dark wizard. I'd call that success. Even though I befriended Harry Potter, despite your complicated feelings about him? Especially because of that. You made your own choices instead of just following my prejudices. That's what I wanted when I raised you. Someone independent, not a copy of myself." Mission accomplished. Then. Indeed. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm proud of you, Hermione. I don't say that often enough. But you've become someone extraordinary, and I'm honored to have played a role in that." Hermione felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Professor, for everything. For taking me in 6 years ago, for teaching me, for giving me the skills to survive this year. I wouldn't be here without you. You would have been extraordinary regardless. I just gave you tools to express it." They lapsed into comfortable silence, and Hermione reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened 6-year-old whose magic was destroying her life, to an 11-year-old witch who'd faced down a troll and a possessed professor. She'd survived her first year at Hogwarts as a Muggle-born Slytherin. She'd made friends despite house divisions. She'd proven that blood status didn't determine worth or ability. And she'd done it all because Severus Snape, former Death Eater, potions master, the most complicated man she'd ever known, had chosen to save her. 5 more years at Hogwarts awaited. Mysteries to solve, challenges to face, dangers to overcome. But Hermione faced them without fear, because she was Hermione Granger Potter, ward of Severus Snape, Slytherin first year, and she was ready for anything. Let us know what you'd like to see next in the comment section below. The end.